Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's King of the Undead. Chapter 21. Long time no see, Wayne. Seeing Wayne looking towards him, Francis, who was standing in the middle, waved to Wayne. "We have been waiting for you for a long time since you escaped." Francis continued, saying that since Wayne jumped off the plane that day, Francis immediately changed the direction of the plane and rushed to New York as quickly as possible. "I originally planned to control the little fat man immediately and wait for Wayne to surrender. However, on his way back to New York, Francis received an order from the organization, requiring him to rush to another base immediately, explain the specific circumstances of the research base's exposure, and bear the punishment he deserved. This also led to him not rushing to the orphanage as soon as possible. He could only contact the orphanage by phone in advance and ask them to restrict the little fat man's movements. Unexpectedly, it was because of this phone call that the news was leaked and a boss let the little fat man go. I thought you wouldn't come back after that little fat guy ran away, but I didn't expect that a staff member would be able to lure you here. Should I say you are a hero, or am I stupid?" Seeing that Wayne ignored him, Francis continued to talk to himself. Although I don't know what method Wayne used to make all the monitors useless, so that he did not discover Wayne's intrusion in time at the beginning, and did not take corresponding precautions, but fortunately, in the end, Wayne was still they were spotted before escaping. Looking at the three people who suddenly appeared, Wayne began to think about ways to escape in his mind. Although he could kill a dozen ordinary soldiers with his bare hands, he was not sure about dealing with mutants, especially with little Fatty and Abba. In the case of two people. While Francis thought he had taken control of the situation and was talking, Wayne suddenly turned around, grabbed the little fat man and a boss one by one, threw them hard against the wall, and shouted at the little fat man. "Road. You go first, Steven. You know villains die from talking too much, Francis." After speaking, Wayne did not climb over the wall, but ran quickly in the other direction. He believed that Francis's main target was still himself, and after his body was strengthened, not to mention whether he could escape successfully, at least it could provide enough time for Fatty and the others to escape. Looking at the little fat man and a boss who were thrown over the wall, and Wayne running towards the playground again. As expected, the three Francis men began to chase in the direction of Wayne without hesitation. The only person they care about is Wayne. An ordinary orphan and a betrayed employee are not worthy of their care. Wayne kept accelerating along the way. Wayne, who grew up in an orphanage, knew the route of the orphanage very well. He kept weaving in and out of various trails, and soon left the three Francis far behind. Francis, who couldn't find any trace of Wayne, could only summon more soldiers to start sealing off the entire orphanage. When he arrived, Francis had already deployed enough people from the organization to seal off the entire orphanage. So Francis is not in a hurry. As long as Wayne is still hiding in the orphanage, he can always be found. At this time, Wayne had quietly crawled into a classroom. Wayne, who had been running around in the orphanage just now, also discovered that the number of soldiers had increased significantly. As long as he tried to run out, he would definitely be discovered. So for the time being, I can only run to the teaching building and hide. Suddenly, Wayne stopped halfway, slowly slowed down his breathing, and hid his figure in a dark corner. With his extraordinary hearing, Wayne had already heard a group of soldiers entering the classroom. Lou's voice. After the soldiers entered the teaching building, they began to search one floor at a time. One soldier was assigned to search the second floor of the teaching building. As an excellent retired soldier, he had performed many missions and searched for possible cases in secret. Hiding enemies were no stranger to him. He held the gun firmly with both hands, arched his body slightly, and put it down gently with every step without making a sound, like a cat hiding in the dark, tracking the prey hiding in the corner, watching in the darker space ahead. The soldier turned on the flashlight he carried. The moment he turned on the flashlight, the soldier only saw an afterimage rushing towards him, and then lost consciousness. This figure was none other than Wayne hiding in the dark. Wayne had discovered the direction of the soldiers a long time ago. After the soldiers came within his attack range, he launched an attack without hesitation. In order to ensure that no bigger attack was caused, there was movement, and Wayne directly attacked the soldier's neck. The other hand dragged the soldier's body to prevent the soldier's body from falling to the ground and making a sound. 10 minutes later, all the soldiers who had not gained anything gathered together downstairs in the teaching building. The captain took the walkie-talkie and said, "No target was found in the teaching building." Then, under the leadership of the captain, the group of soldiers moved to the next search location. "David, you go search the first floor first." Soon, when they reached another building, the captain stopped and shouted to the team. However, after 10 seconds, there were still no soldiers in the queue. Seeing that no one answered, the captain walked up to a soldier who was looking around angrily. "Didn't you hear David talking to you? What are you looking at? Answer me." At this time, the soldier suddenly reacted and took off the helmet on his head, revealing a young face. "Do you have to be the first to call my name?" The soldier, Wayne, was a little depressed at this time. After just killing the soldier, Wayne had an idea and changed into a set of soldier's clothes, thinking that he could fish in troubled waters later by using his identity as a soldier. After all, this is how spy movies work. Just when Wayne imagined that he was possessed by 007 and was about to fight, he heard the captain at the front giving orders to an unlucky guy named David. After a while, no one came out. Wayne, who was hiding in the team, was also a little curious. Among this group of seemingly well-trained soldiers, there was actually someone with such personality. He couldn't help but look around, and then Wayne discovered that the captain was heading towards him. In an instant, Wayne knew that his journey as an agent was over before it even began. He never imagined that he was so lucky. It seemed that as long as he returned to the orphanage, the god of toilet would be with him. After finally playing Dress Up PY once, the first one was selected. Now that he had been discovered, Wayne simply took off his helmet. While the captain was still dazed, Wayne took the lead, grabbed the captain, used him as a human weapon, swung it and threw it at the soldiers beside him. After knocking down the 2 soldiers on the left, the other soldiers finally reacted and all raised their guns. Boom, boom, boom. The orphanage, which had been quiet for a while, heard a burst of gunfire again. Not daring to get too entangled with the names of the soldiers, Wayne knocked down a few soldiers, looked around to determine his position, and then found a direction closest to the wall and started to escape. "It has been delayed for so long, I believe the little fat man is out of danger. Anyway, they have been discovered, so they can only break out as quickly as possible." Wayne ran towards the wall of the orphanage as fast as he could, without deliberately trying to avoid the bullets. Due to their speed, basically most of the soldiers could not hit Wayne. Even if 1 or 2 stray bullets hit Wayne, it would not have any impact on Wayne's actions. Looking at the approaching wall, Wayne seemed to see hope of escaping. At this moment, an earth wall suddenly appeared on the originally flat ground, blocking Wayne's way out. Looking at the earth wall in front of him, Wayne did not stop. He even accelerated his forward momentum, stretched out his arms in front of him, and hit the earth wall firmly. Boom! Wayne directly knocked out a human-sized hole in the newly formed earth wall. This sudden appearance of the earth wall failed to complete its mission. Just as Wayne was about to continue escaping, a small missile hit the ground in front of Wayne. The huge airflow generated by the explosion interrupted Wayne's forward trend and pushed Wayne backwards. When Wayne was thrown upside down by the airflow, the ground behind Wayne had already begun to roll. Large swaths of soil emerged from the gaps in the cement floor, forming a huge spherical prison out of thin air, enveloping Wayne in midair. I saw the muscular man who had just been standing next to Francis put down the rocket launcher in his hand and slowly walked towards the earth ball from the flower bed. "First time meeting you, little mouse. My name is Tussie. Do you like the mouse cage I built for you?" The muscular man spoke in a very loud voice, allowing Wayne in the dirt ball to hear clearly. "Your soundproofing is not very good. Are you working for a shady real estate developer?" Wayne in the dirt ball shook off the dust on his body and stood up. He reached out and patted the dirt ball, but it didn't feel very firm. When he rushed through the earth walls just now, Wayne felt that these earth walls were not as hard as expected, and were not even as strong as the walls of ordinary homes. This also made Wayne realize for the first time that not all mutants' awakening abilities are as abnormal as himself or the little fat man. During this period of time, Wayne has fully realized the power of his abilities. Not only can he not die, but he has also greatly strengthened his physical fitness. Although he has not had a day of formal combat training, he can easily kill a dozen well-trained soldiers. The second mutant Wayne encountered was Fatty, although Fatty's actual combat ability was considered a scumbag compared to Wayne's. But the little fat man's ability made a person who was not good at computers at all become a legend in the hacker world in a short period of time. Entering and exiting the intranets of major departments and organizations was as easy as visiting the back garden. This also made Wayne subconsciously believe that all mutants should be as powerful as himself or little Fatty. At this time, Wayne did not know that he had been defined as an alpha-level mutant by some organizations as soon as he awakened. In addition to the legendary Omega mutants, alpha-level mutants are already the absolute pinnacle of mutants. Ha! How dare you talk to me like that, you pathetic little mouse. Tusi's tone was a little angry. As one of the first batch of superpowers successfully created by the organization, Tusi always believed that he should be superior to others. Tusi is not a mutant. He used to be just an ordinary soldier who carried a gun, but the organization's experiments gave him magical abilities. After possessing the ability, Tusi believed that he had become a pioneer in human evolution, and mutants were just a garbage race that emerged from genetic mutations in the evolution of ordinary people. Tusi didn't pay much attention to a person like that who was only in his teens. He just wanted to let this ungrateful brat taste the consequences of talking nonsense. Tusi, who walked to the side of the earth ball, stretched out his hand and put it on the earth ball, and began to gradually reduce the size of the earth ball. In fact, Tusi's ability is not particularly powerful, and he can only rely on shortening the distance to strengthen his control over the earth. This ability is particularly useful when dealing with ordinary people, but Wayne is not an ordinary person. Boom! Tusi, who had just put his hand on the earth ball, had not exerted any force when suddenly a hand burst out of the earth ball he had made and pinched Tusi's neck accurately. Then the arm was pulled back hard, and with a click, the neck of Tusi, who had been arrogant just now, was broken. Wow, wow, wow. The out-of-control dirt ball turned into ordinary dirt and scattered on the ground, revealing the unharmed Wayne inside. As I said, shoddy projects cost lives. After looking at Tusi's body on the ground, Wayne shook his head and then continued running towards the outside of the wall. The soldiers behind had seen Wayne ignoring the machine guns in their hands before, and now this man had directly killed the superpowered companions who were invincible in the hearts of these soldiers. Seeing Wayne moving away at this time, these soldiers were filled with a sense of powerlessness. Fighting against a player who couldn't be beaten or killed, who couldn't run, and whose opponent could kill them with one punch, made them a little broken. So the current scene is a dozen soldiers with machine guns in their hands standing quietly, watching the figure in front of them quickly move away from them. A few soldiers were even a little happy in their hearts, fearing that Wayne would suddenly lose his mind and come back to kill again before running away. The mission they received when they came was to help capture an orphan, but they didn't know that the orphan suddenly turned into an invincible monster with strange powers. As soon as Wayne's figure disappeared, Francis and Gina rushed over from behind. Looking at the soldiers standing in front of him and the body of Tus on the ground not far away, Francis suppressed his anger and said to the soldiers next to him in a calm voice, "Can someone explain to me what's going on?" Looking at the silent soldiers, Francis walked up quickly, grabbed one of them, and pushed hard. "A bunch of trash. Okay, don't you know what kind of person Tusi is?" Gina saw Francis starting to get angry at the soldiers next to him, and stepped forward and said. The relationship between Gina and Tus was not good, and she even felt a little happy when she saw Tus die here. "Don't we still have a backup plan?" Gina continued to comfort. "HMPH, let's gather all the hands we can use at the moment. This time we have already paid the price of 1 tutus. We must capture Wayne tomorrow." Francis let go of the soldier in front of him, shook his hand, and walked towards the interior of the orphanage. On the other side, Wayne, who had just escaped, did not rush to find the little fat man. Instead, he found a hidden place nearby and hid. After waiting for about 10 minutes, he found that no one was chasing him out, and then he started to follow. The path leads towards the place where we parked our car. The problem was solved for the time being. While walking, Wayne was suddenly startled, wondering how he should go back. The mobile phone had been damaged during the fight, and now it was impossible to contact the little fat man. Based on Wayne's understanding of the little fat man, he may encounter two situations now. The first is that the little fat man is smarter and runs to a hidden place to hide, waiting for him to escape and go together. Another situation is that the little fat man drives away, and then he needs to run home. I hope it's the first one. Thinking about it, Wayne couldn't help but quicken his pace. Wayne had always been a little worried about the IQ of his first team member, otherwise he wouldn't have needed to open the back door with the little fat guy's ability. Not long after, Wayne, who quickly rushed to the parking place, looked at the empty street with a hint of sadness in his heart. The little fat man followed his instructions. Not only did the people leave first, he also drove the parked car, gone. No matter how urgent the situation is in the future, you must remember to remove the car key first. Wayne dragged his tired body and walked silently on the deserted street. As he walked, he thought about how to thank the little fat man when he went back. However, just after walking through a block, Wayne, who was in a daze, suddenly felt that he had kicked something. If it weren't for his excellent body balance, he might have been kicked by a dog. Which fool threw the tire in the middle of the road? I wish him instant noodles without seasoning packets. Looking at the tires on the ground, Wayne muttered softly. Then the next second, Wayne, who raised his head, was instantly confused. On the opposite road, a white sports car hit itself horribly in order to get in close contact with the beautiful pillars. Next to the white sports car were squatting a familiar fat man and a man lying on the ground. Sure enough, he still underestimated the level of his team members. He never expected that in addition to the two situations he analyzed, he could actually play out the third situation. At this moment, the little fat man was squatting on the ground and observing Wayne's situation through the surveillance cameras along the road. When Wayne saw the little fat man also saw Wayne through the surveillance cameras, so the little fat man quickly turned around and waved at Wayne. He waved his hand. Seeing the excited expression on the little fat man's face, Wayne felt a slight pain in his liver. Wayne, you're so awesome, you actually killed that muscular man instantly. The little fat man was still in a state of excitement. This was the first time the little fat man went on duty. He appeared in a sports car and successfully rescued a boss, and the three of them escaped unharmed. Although there was a little accident in the end, this operation was like a movie in the heart of the little fat man. Standard agent mission. How did you do it? Instead of thanking the little fat man for the compliment, Wayne pointed to the waste car next to him and said, "Ah, this is an accident that happened during our retreat." The little fat man scratched his belly awkwardly and explained, "After we came out, we were afraid that someone would chase us, so we found a small road to hide for a while. After we confirmed that it was safe, we returned to the parking spot." At this point, the little fat man suddenly felt that he had done a good job, cleared his throat and continued. "Later I found that there were still keys in the car. I knew that if we stayed here, we would only become a burden to you, so I just wanted to drive away from this place as soon as possible. Whatever happens next is all Abbas's fault." The little fat man was also a little angry and glanced at a boss who was lying on the ground and had fallen into a coma. "Originally I asked him to drive, but he said he was injured and couldn't drive, so I had to drive by myself. Then I accidentally got a little excited, and that's what happened." After saying that, the little fat man clapped his hands helplessly, and once again glanced at a boss lying on the ground with disgust. "Well, we can only take a taxi back." Wayne felt a little hopeless and looked at the empty street. The orphanage is not located in a downtown area, and it is a bit too late now. Even if the little fat boy crashed into a car, no one would notice, and the taxi driver would not come to such a place with no business at night. After carrying the unconscious boss, Wayne took the lead and walked in front. "Wayne, we don't have any money." The little fat man quickly followed Wayne and reminded him. However, Wayne, who was feeling depressed, ignored the little fat man and walked faster towards the next block. "I will never bring this scammer with me next time." While walking, Wayne suddenly looked back at the little fat man behind him. After this operation, Wayne discovered that the little fat man's ability did not play any role in actual combat. Instead, he was more suitable for logistics and providing them with some technical support. This is the most suitable position for the little fat man. Half an hour later, Wayne and the others finally saw a taxi without passengers on the street. The fat man stretched out his hand and waved to the driver. "You are The driver parked the car on the side of the road and saw through the window a man dressed like a soldier in a movie. His body was stained with blood. The small holes in his clothes were obviously bullet holes. He was also carrying an unconscious man, middle-aged man. There was a fat man next to him, although he was dressed normally, but he was also dirty. He was about to open the car door with a smile on his face. The driver, who had not yet finished speaking, realized in an instant that these three people were definitely not good people. He subconsciously wanted to shift gears and leave, but the man in soldier's clothes stepped in front of the car. I have something urgent. My son is waiting for me to come home and change his diaper. The driver's voice was trembling. Bang! A man wearing a soldier's uniform casually punched the engine cover, and a deep punch mark appeared on the engine cover. Think again. How old is your son? Wayne looked at the driver with some gray hair in front of him speechlessly. Is it ridiculous that you, a man who looks almost 60 years old, want to go home to change your son's diaper? Is it possible that your son, who is in his 30s, still needs to wear diapers? Ha ha ha, come up quickly. I'm not thinking well and I remembered it wrong. After secretly swallowing, the driver smiled awkwardly. After getting in the car, Wayne and a boss sat in the back seat, while the fat man sat in the front seat and gave directions to the driver through the navigation system. Along the way, the driver showed his best driving skills in his life, even running through several red lights. Every time he glanced at Wayne in the rearview mirror, the driver couldn't help but replay this man's violent actions in his mind. Now the driver, I just want to get them to their location quickly, for fear of being killed and silenced by them. Not long after, the car stopped steadily near Tony's house. Wayne directly dragged a boss out of the car. He knew that the little fat man had no money, so he did this on purpose. Who told the little fat man to crash the sports car, causing him to go so far? Before the fat man in the car had time to get out of the car, he saw Wayne carrying a boss more than 10 meters away. Ahem, have you seen us today? After pondering for 2 seconds, the little fat man had an idea. With a sullen face, he deliberately lowered his voice and said to the driver next to him. No, I didn't see anything. I'm going home to breastfeed my son. The driver was also stunned for a moment, and suddenly he came over. At this time, anyone who has watched a Hollywood blockbuster should respond. Well, you're very good. The more you know, the sooner you'll die. Do you understand? The little fat man continued to lower his voice and got out of the car while talking. After taking 2 steps, he realized that the driver behind him didn't ask for money. The little fat man couldn't help but cover his mouth and let out a sinister laugh. When the driver here was about to start the car, he suddenly heard a perverted laugh from the man outside the car. His hand that was about to change gears trembled, and then he immediately started off at a faster speed, and the whole movement was done in one go. Seeing that he had finally escaped from the clutches of the devil, the driver couldn't help but pray for the man being carried, hoping that he would be able to recover and that he would never work the night shift again. It was too dangerous. After this period of continuous improvement, Tony finally completed the design of the armor, made various optimizations on the original basis, and added various functions. Now only the final coloring step is left in the entire armor production. Tony, who has a cool personality, doesn't want the armor he worked so hard to fly around in the sky like an ugly piece of silver iron. Just after confirming the combination of gold and red, Tony looked up and saw Wayne and the little fat man walking and carrying someone. Haha, was the first job your team took on a kidnapping? Tony already knew that Wayne had decided to form a team and was trying to surpass himself in terms of property, so now he looked at Wayne dressed as an American soldier and couldn't help but joke. This is an advanced practice. Are you sure you don't want to join my team? Tony, the one who joins now, is a veteran. Wayne put down a boss on his shoulders and invited Tony again. After pulling the little fat man into his team, Wayne immediately took up Tony's idea. Now Tony not only has an armor with good combat effectiveness, but also has a lot of wealth, which can be used as the starting capital of their team. However, Tony rejected Wayne at the first time because he had no intention of accompanying 2 little brats. Playhouse. Just as Tony and Wayne were chatting, Jarvis's voice suddenly sounded next to them. A tracking device was found on the unconscious gentleman, Mr. Stark. Tony, who was chatting with Wayne, changed his expression instantly and said, Jarvis, cut the signal. Then he turned his head and looked at Wayne with a serious face and said, "What on earth are you doing?" "Ah, okay. We went to the orphanage, and this person is the one who helped the little fat boy escape." Jarvis's alarm made Wayne a little bit at a loss. The reason he didn't tell Tony about it was that he didn't want to involve Tony in the mutant matter. Unexpectedly, it exposed the location of Tony's family and brought Tony directly closer to the center of danger. At this time, Wayne also understood why Francis watched him escape like this. After he escaped, in order to avoid being followed, he hid on a trail for a while. At that time, he was still surprised that no one chased him out. It turned out to be because they had already prepared a backup plan. Hanging his head in annoyance, Wayne continued, "I thought this time it would go smoothly, but I didn't expect it to be like this. I didn't want to drag you into it. I'm sorry, Tony." After hearing Wayne's apology, Tony walked over and patted Wayne on the shoulder, slowing down his voice. "I don't blame you for leaking my home address, Wayne. Do you remember that we agreed on the plane back that I would be responsible for your revenge? We are friends, aren't we?" At the same time, the welfare home. The signal stayed at this location for a while and then was cut off. Gina was facing an instrument, watching the moving mark keep moving, then staying in one place for a while and then suddenly disappearing, and said to Francis, who was sitting behind her, "Although we didn't expect him to suddenly appear in the orphanage this time, which caught us off guard, but fortunately we stayed behind to help. Can we figure out what went wrong with our surveillance?" Francis was sitting on a sofa and asked Gina after hearing what she said. "It hasn't been found out yet. The system has not been invaded. It seems that it started playing yesterday's scenes automatically in an instant." Gina was also a little confused when she mentioned this. They all knew that Wayne had grown up in an orphanage and had no expertise in computers. Logically speaking, he had no access to people who were good at this area, so they accidentally let Wayne got a loophole. This time, because of Tusi's death, someone in the organization started to cause trouble for us again. Francis never expected that Tooth would be instantly killed by Wayne. According to their records, Wayne only had super self-healing ability. He did not know that the awakening had also brought all aspects of physical enhancement to Wayne. The information asymmetry and Tooth's arrogant character caused a superpower person who was finally trained in the organization to die here, and allowed Wayne to escape successfully again. This made people in the organization who were originally dissatisfied with Francis start to jump again, out. "Ha, is it just that trash? What's the use of artificially cultivated abilities? It can only kill ordinary soldiers. It is vulnerable to slightly stronger mutants. I don't know what those people in the organization think." Quote. Mentioning Tusi, Gina said with some disdain that she had always looked down on the so-called superpowers trained in the organization, let alone Tusi, whose head was almost raised to the sky. "Don't talk nonsense. It is said that the Baron has already achieved results, and there are two very successful examples." Having said this, Francis stopped the topic. The organization has a very strict hierarchy for the management of information and intelligence. Gina's level is not high enough to know too much. Remember this position, tell everyone to get ready, and prepare for a raid tomorrow night. I don't want anything to go wrong this time. Francis took a deep breath and stopped talking to Gina. He sank into the sofa and began to recharge for tomorrow's action. Early the next morning, the little fat man opened his hazy eyes and suddenly saw Wayne sitting at the desk looking at his mobile phone. "Hey, have you been watching all night?" Standing up from the bed with a puffy belly, the little fat man walked towards Wayne, who was looking at his cell phone. After settling a boss yesterday, Wayne did not return to his room. Instead, he ran into the little fat man's room and mysteriously asked the little fat man to do him a favor. The little fat man, who thought there was another big move, agreed wholeheartedly, and when he was about to start a big fight, he realized that Wayne just wanted his help in making a program on his mobile phone that can see all the books. "What do you want this for?" After casually helping Wayne install the program, the little fat man asked. "Well, after what happened today, I found that as a captain, my handling and thinking of things are not comprehensive enough. I need to improve myself." Wayne looked at his phone solemnly. What happened today made him feel a little guilty, but Wayne was not an easily discouraged person. He now needed to continuously improve his abilities. Then he ignored the fat man on his side and started reading on his phone alone. After looking at the sleepy little fat man, Wayne finally put down the phone he had been looking at all night and stretched out. Being up all night was not a big problem for Wayne today. Can't you learn from your great captain? Looking at the little fat man with some hatred, Wayne said, accompanied by the little fat man snoring. Wayne had read more than a dozen books this night. It has to be said that the enhancement of superpowers is very abnormal. Wayne feels that he has exceeded the limits of human beings in all aspects. While such an excellent self continues to study, the lazy fat man in front of him is still as decadent as ever. Thinking of this, Wayne disliked the little fat man even more. What did you see? Ignoring Wayne's complaints, the little fat man reached out curiously to see what books Wayne had read all night. Hey, you have to have your own opinion. Although I am excellent, you should have your own ideas and don't blindly imitate me. Looking at the little fat man's extended hand, Wayne suddenly put away his phone. Then he seemed to realize that his performance was a little guilty. After forcefully preaching to the little fat man, he ran out of the room in despair. What on earth did you see? The little fat man who had just woken up was a little confused by Wayne's operation, and then took out his mobile phone and said, "What did Wayne read last night?" I saw a row of book names instantly appearing on the screen, sorted by Wayne's time, as follows. The Art of War, The Analects of Confucius, A Brief History of the World. Looking at these very deceptive book titles, although he didn't know what they were about, the little fat man nodded involuntarily. It seemed that Wayne was really working hard. Then he looked down. How to maintain the momentum of a master, how to make your subordinates do things for you willingly, how to become a millionaire, a guide to high-class behavior. I take back my previous thoughts. At this time, in the New York airport, Wade was walking in front with large and small bags of luggage, followed by a very beautiful woman. That idiot over there, yes, he's talking about you. Why don't you go back and see your old mother? Suddenly Wade yelled at a pot-bellied man on the other side who was staring at the woman, and then gave him a middle finger. Okay, Wade, don't do this. The woman behind her felt a little embarrassed and patted Wade in front of her. You didn't see the expression on that wretched man, Vanessa. I was already trying hard not to stuff his pig head into the toilet. After glaring at the man again, Wade said to Vanessa beside him. These two people were Wade and Vanessa, who had returned from traveling outside. Due to Wayne's genes, Wade was not disfigured, so he did not avoid Vanessa like in the original book. The day after escaping, Wade couldn't wait to find his goddess, and then the two began traveling around. Wade, who had been imprisoned for several months, wanted to make up for everything he had lost during this period, return. However, when it comes to traveling, Wade is actually looking for traces of the organization. Everywhere he goes, Wade will play with Vanessa during the day, and when night falls and Vanessa falls asleep, Wade will sneak out and become a vengeful devil. However, Wade did not gain much during this period, so after receiving a call from Wayne yesterday, Wayne rushed over with Vanessa. On the one hand, it was because he and Wayne had indeed developed a deep relationship during that period, so after learning that he had escaped, he wanted to see Wayne as soon as possible. The second reason was that after hearing Wayne talk about the orphanage, Wade remembered that this was also a way to find an organization, which was much more effective than searching everywhere without a target. Dalian, I play in the mud in the Northeast. Although the Northeast is not big, I don't have a home in Dalian. Wade and Vanessa were sitting in a taxi, preparing to go to Tony's house to meet Wayne and the others. The driver was an Indian guy, and a very Indian song was playing in the car. Are you here for tourism? But the place you went to is not very safe recently. The driver spoke with an Indian accent to the two people behind him while skillfully weaving through the traffic. What happened? Wade was still listening to this cheerful folk song with his eyes closed, but when he heard the driver's words, he suddenly became interested. I heard from my driver friend that last night, a man dressed as a special force and a fat man tied up a man and did some unspeakable things. The driver who took them there was so scared that the driver who took them there did not dare to work the night shift. Quote. As he spoke, the Indian driver seemed to think of certain scenes, and his whole body shivered involuntarily. Vanessa's expression changed slightly after hearing this, and she nervously grabbed Wade next to her. Wade immediately puffed up his chest, assumed I am very strong, posture, comforted Vanessa next to him, and said to the driver in front of him, "If I meet these two perverts, I will blow their balls, and then let them be a pair of harmonious and mutually supportive gourd boys in their future lives. Hurry up, or I will blow your balls first." After secretly glancing at the fierce expression of the man behind him, the Indian driver subconsciously tightened his legs and stepped on the accelerator. Not long after, Wade and Vanessa arrived at the door of Tony's house and saw the three people who came to greet them. First meeting, Wade. "Haha, it's great to see you, Wayne." Wayne and Wade, who hadn't seen each other for a while, were both a little excited. This was their first meeting in the outside world, as ordinary people, not experimental subjects in a laboratory. So after meeting, the two gave each other a tight hug. When they were locked in the laboratory, they had imagined this scene countless times, and this scene finally came true. Tony glanced at the two men hugging each other with some contempt, crossed over, and walked towards Vanessa behind him and said, "Hello, beautiful lady, please introduce yourself. My name is Tony Stark. This is my home. Come with me and I will choose a room for you." Wade, who was exchanging emotions with Wayne here, saw Tony walking towards his girlfriend and immediately pushed Wayne aside. He quickly ran between Tony and Vanessa, and glanced at the playboy in front of him with some vigilance. "Ha ha ha, Mr. Tony Stark, I am a big fan of yours. This is my fiancée, Vanessa. Are you about to take us to the room?" Wade held Tony's hand with an attentive look, while discreetly blocking Tony's view of Vanessa. After a brief introduction, everyone finally returned to Tony's house. In the hall of Tony's house, 5 people, Wayne, Tony, Fatty, Abbas, and Wade, were sitting around the table, sharing with each other the information they knew about the organization. Vanessa was taken upstairs by Pepper to chat about some topics that women love. Originally, Wayne thought that Abbas could provide them with more information about the organization, but after a careful greeting, he was a little disappointed to find that although Abbas was an employee of the welfare home and knew some of the dirty tricks in the welfare home, he did not know that the organization exists. During Deadpool's investigation during this period, most of what he found were only low-level figures in some organizations. Although he obtained a lot of information, there was almost no useful information. Therefore, their only way to obtain information at present is to break into the orphanage, try to catch Francis, and force out more information about the organization. "Hey, Wade, get ready. We are going to the orphanage again tonight. The address here has been exposed. We need to catch them off guard before they come here." Seeing that Wade was looking at the little fat man in a daze, Wayne stretched out his hand and waved it in front of Wade's eyes, indicating that he could start getting ready. "You have to take me with you this time. Now that the armor is complete, I can fight better than you." It was Tony who spoke. Since Tony returned and announced the closure of Stark Industries' weapons department, the Stark Group's board of directors unanimously decided to remove Tony from the group's management and change it to be managed by Obadiah. Although Tony was very angry about this, he had nothing to do because the company's stock price continued to fall and the board of directors had the right to remove Tony's CEO position, so Tony could only work hard to study armor during this time. Since the armor was completed, Tony has been to the Middle East several times and has successively eliminated several armed organizations. At this moment, Tony has sufficient confidence in his combat effectiveness and is afraid that Wayne will sneak out again, so he quickly said, "Okay, I'm going back to the room first." Wade retracted his gaze from the little fat man and walked upstairs with a somewhat inexplicable expression. When he passed by a trash can, his eyes suddenly froze. A bloody soldier's uniform was sitting quietly in the center of the trash can. Wade subconsciously looked back at the fat man who had just stood up, recalling in his mind what the driver said to him when he arrived. Last night, a man dressed as a special force and a fat man tied up a man and did some unspeakable things. Tony Stark is a famous playboy, but Wade has never heard that he likes men, so he can be ruled out. Looking at the smiling Wayne downstairs with some horror, Wade thought he had discovered something. He had heard others say a long time ago that some people will have certain psychological symptoms after experiencing particularly great stimulation or torture. These changes are the result of many metamorphoses. As for Wayne, he was used as an experimental subject some time ago and was tortured severely for a month. "What are you looking at?" Wayne downstairs saw Wade suddenly looking at him with a strange expression when he was halfway there, and asked with a smile. Yeah, it's okay. Shivering, Wade quickly walked back to his room, quickly locked the door, took out the pair of knives from the suitcase that he had somehow used to avoid airplane security, and carried them behind his back. Touching the 2 knives on the back, Wade breathed a sigh of relief and said to Vanessa, who was sitting on the bed cleaning her clothes. My dear, I will keep my moral integrity for you. If they dare to mess with me, I will chop them to death. Wade originally thought that what he had to worry about most this time was his Vanessa. After all, Tony was a well-known playboy in the United States, but he never expected that now even his personal safety was seriously threatened. Wade suddenly I missed the simple Wayne in the laboratory. At night, Wayne looked at the man in front of him in confusion. The man in front of him was dressed mainly in red with some black tights. He also wore a red mask with panda eyes and 2 samurai swords tied to his back. He was standing straight in front of Wayne. Wade, what's wrong with your outfit? After being stunned for a full minute, Wayne finally reacted, patted the water stains on his pants, and asked the person in front of him. Yes, the man in the tights is Wade. Wayne had never had the habit of drinking coffee before, but after he read a book yesterday, he was suddenly inspired and began to imitate Tony, sitting elegantly on the sofa and slowly tasting the coffee that brought to his tongue a hint of bitterness. As soon as he took a sip, a red figure suddenly flashed in front of him, and Wayne almost dropped the coffee in his hand in fright. However, as soon as his hand moved, Wade's voice came from inside the tights. As soon as Wayne retracted his hand, the coffee followed the inertia and spilled on Wayne's pants. I'll feel safer wearing this outfit. Seeing Wayne no longer staring at him, Wade, wearing tights, replied. In the minute that Wayne stared at him, Wade used his strong willpower to control his hands that wanted to pull out the 2 knives behind his back. After all, she and Wayne were in a relationship that shared weal and woe. As long as he didn't touch her, she should still be considerate of him. If she wanted to blame him, it would be her own perfect figure. Thinking of this, Wade assumed a more coquettish posture, and a feeling called dedication suddenly appeared in his heart. Wayne was so lucky to have a friend like him. Cough cough. Tony came up from downstairs and coughed, interrupting the strange atmosphere. He took a look at Wade, who was wearing strange clothes. Is this your combat uniform? The color choice is good. It would be even more perfect if you change the black to gold. Ha ha ha, yes, I even gave myself a codename, Deadpool. Hearing Tony's praise, Wade was a little proud. After escaping, Wade began his own road of revenge. In order to better protect himself and his girlfriend, Wade specially made this kind of uniform that covered his whole body, and gave himself a code name, Prevent Your True Information from Being Exposed. After hearing Wade's code name, Tony nodded thoughtfully, feeling that he should also think of a louder code name. However, at this moment, a small missile flew from the darkness not far away. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the whole house suddenly shook. The missile hit the wall on the first floor of the villa. In an instant, the originally luxurious decoration was blown into pieces, and dust was scattered everywhere. After stabilizing his body, Wayne stood up from the sofa and said to Tony, "You go put on your armor, Wade, and I will go out and wear it first." After saying that, he and Wade rushed out together. As soon as they walked out, they saw 2 more missiles flying towards the villa. We need to deal with the one with the missile launcher first. My swords are already thirsty. Looking at the enemy on the lawn not far away, Wade finally got what he wanted and pulled out the double knives from behind. In fact, he preferred to use guns to deal with the enemies, but he came in a hurry this time and was able to slip the double knives through the airport security check. It's not easy anymore. I thought that Tony, an arms dealer, would have enough weapons at home, but Tony, who owned armor, was not interested in ordinary guns, so there was no gun in the house that Wade could use. Steven, take Piper and Vanessa to the first floor to hide. Tony ordered the little fat man, who had just come out of the kitchen, and then ran towards the place where his armor was stored. The little fat man quickly hid in the basement with the only 2 ladies in the house. After all, there were only 3 of them in the house who had no fighting ability, and staying outside would only become a burden. No, where is a boss? Suddenly, the little fat man asked the 2 people next to him. I didn't see him either, Pepper and Vanessa said in unison. Only then did the little fat man realize that in the rush, they had all ignored a boss. This was also because a boss himself did not like to talk, and he had a face all day long. His sense of presence was indeed too low, which made the little fat man in the I didn't think of this person at first. The little fat man who reacted was about to walk up and take a boss with him. Then, after taking a few steps, there were two more huge explosions, and a huge broken wall fell down and blocked the basement door. At this time, Wayne and Wade had already braved the hail of bullets to find the troops that attacked them. Wade took the lead in rushing towards the soldier holding the missile launcher, completely ignoring the bullets hitting him. Wade directly killed himself with a knife. The goal. Then he picked up the submachine gun on the soldier and started to fight guerrilla warfare with the opposite side through the wooded terrain. As an excellent mercenary, Wade is all too familiar with this scene now. Although his superpower has not strengthened his body, his many years of experience have enabled him to make better use of terrain and various weapons. So in this battle, Wade's lethality is much higher than Wayne's. Seeing Wade single-handedly take out the soldier with the missile launcher, Wayne also began to attack in another direction. However, as soon as he killed the three soldiers hiding behind a huge rock, Wayne felt as if his back was hit by a high-speed train, and his whole body flew forward. After spitting out a mouthful of blood and feeling the rapid repair of his internal organs, Wayne looked up at where he was just now. He saw Gina, still holding a match in her mouth, slowly walking in his direction. "Ha, Francis's little follower is here." Wayne turned over from the ground and taunted, then suddenly remembered something, put his hands behind his back, lowered his head, no longer looked at Gina, and stood silent. Looking at Wayne, who put his hands behind his back and stopped moving, instead standing silently, Gina frowned in confusion. "After tens. Ahem, shouldn't you rush over?" Suddenly, the silent Wayne raised his head in embarrassment, looked at Gina who was standing there and asked. At this time, Gina finally made a move, no longer guessing Wayne's intentions, and rushed over quickly, extending her fist. Boom! There was a muffled sound, and Wayne met Gina's fist with a punch. His body did not move at all, but Gina took a few steps back uncontrollably. With a trace of surprise on her face, Gina pointed out the match in her mouth and started to actively attack Wayne. After a fierce exchange, Wayne was caught off guard and Gina seized the opportunity and kicked him in the stomach. His whole body flew backwards towards a sandbag that was knocked away. Although Wayne's strength and speed are stronger than Gina, Wayne has not systematically learned fighting. Compared with Gina, Wayne is like a baby with strange strength, although every punch can produce huge power, but failed to hit the target at all. On the contrary, Gina has many years of combat experience after being trained by the organization, and she also has strengthened strength, and also has more effective attack routines and evasive tricks. Therefore, although she is not as strong as Wayne in terms of strength and speed, she can still be fast, of knocking it down. At this time, a red and gold humanoid armor suddenly flashed across the dark night sky, flying quickly towards the direction of the battle. As soon as he arrived at the battlefield, Tony saw Wayne being pinned to the ground and being beaten by Gina. He used a smart aiming device to aim at Gina on Wayne. Tony raised his hand and shot out a laser. Bang! A big hole was made in the ground, but it did not hit Gina, who had been alert for a long time. The slutty Tony painted his armor in sparkling gold and red, so anyone who was not blind could see him from a distance. Flying everywhere. Isn't this the strong little Wayne? He was bullied by a woman and couldn't change his hands. Tony, who missed the attack, did not continue to pursue, but instead looked at Wayne lying on the ground and laughed. "Go away, Tony, we don't need your help here." Feeling that the broken bones had recovered as before, Wayne slowly stood up from the pit. No longer caring about maintaining his master's demeanor, he looked at Gina not far away and rushed forward again. Since Wayne awakened his powers, this is the strongest opponent he has ever encountered. Unlike Toos, the half-assed superpower last time, Gina's fighting ability is obviously more powerful, especially her fighting skills. It also made Wayne realize his own shortcomings again. Although he has strong strength, speed, perception and recovery ability, his simple and crude attack method cannot make better use of his combat effectiveness. After realizing his shortcomings, Wayne began to observe and imitate Gina's movements in battle. Wayne has been very talented in fighting since he was a child. This is why Wayne doesn't want Tony to intervene in the battle between him and Gina. He is confident that he can defeat his opponent on his own, and he also needs to experience more battles to hone himself. Seeing Wayne persistently attacking Gina, Tony did not stop him, but flew towards the soldiers who were slowly approaching the villa. He could not let these soldiers enter the villa. After all, his little Pepper was hiding in the villa. And Tony is not worried about Wayne's safety. He knows that there may be creatures or ways in the world that can kill Wayne, but it will definitely not be this strong-looking woman. As Wayne took the initiative to attack again and was knocked down again and again, Wayne slowly began to form his own fighting style. In fact, to put it bluntly, it was reckless. Faced with Gina's fists containing huge power, Wayne turned a blind eye every time, and even took the initiative to meet him. When Gina hit him, he got a chance to hit his opponent. This kind of fearless attack method can only be used by mutants like Wayne who have strong self-healing abilities. At this time, Gina began to feel a little timid in the face of Wayne's suicidal attack. Wayne was hit by her and recovered in less than 2 seconds. She might be okay if she was punched by Wayne, but as time passed, Gina felt that her movements began to slow down a bit. And that Wayne was not only shameless in his playing style, he was also faster than her, which resulted in Gina trying to get rid of Wayne several times without success. In this battle that started with food abuse, the balance of victory has slowly tilted towards Wayne, and it is only a matter of time before Gina falls to the ground. Francis, who was commanding the soldiers in the distance, looked at Gina who was slowly falling into a disadvantage, and gradually lost the feeling of strategizing at the beginning. Ordinary soldiers are just delivering food to mutants of Wayne's level, so he can only help Gina by himself. Unlike Toos, Gina has been his assistant for many years. He can't just look at it like this. Something happened to Gina. Francis, who handed over command to the captain next to him and was about to run towards Wayne and Gina, was a little irritated. I thought that capturing Wayne was just a trivial matter, but I didn't expect that so many changes would occur. First, the Tin Man flying from the sky suddenly appeared and killed a large number of his soldiers within a few minutes. And now the pervert in red tights in front of him not only destroyed the Stark Industries missile launcher he bought at a high price, but now also blocked his route to support Gina. "Who are you?" Taking out the dagger hidden in his boot, Francis asked the person in front of him. "Well, dear Dr. Francis, don't you recognize me? I've been thinking about the one-stop service you booked." Clenching the knife in his hand, Wade said with gritted teeth, he had been looking forward to this day for a long time. "Then let's get to know each other again. My name is Deadpool." After Wade finished speaking, he raised the knife and swung it at Francis. "Are you Wade who didn't die last time and are here to die again this time?" A retreat to avoid Wade's knife, Francis reacted. Then, without waiting for Wade to reply, he rushed towards Wade with a quick stride. He used a short dagger, 1 inch shorter and 1 inch dangerous. He needs to close the distance to better utilize the power of the dagger. Seeing Francis's plan, Wade also took a step back, not giving Francis a chance to get close. Relying on the attack distance advantage of his double swords, Wade always kept a certain distance from Francis, so Francis could only parry hastily. Boom, crack, 2 sounds came from the bodies of Wayne and Gina respectively. Wayne was kicked in the thigh by Gina again. The huge force made Wayne unable to maintain his body balance, and he fell flat to the ground. At the same time that Gina kicked Wayne, Wayne also punched Gina's collarbone with all his strength. There was a crisp breaking sound. Gina's collarbone was finally overwhelmed after being hit 3 times by Wayne. Break off in the middle. After falling to the ground, Wayne quickly stood up again. Apart from a lot of dust on his body, he looked uninjured. It was as if he had just returned from a trip to the desert, and it didn't look like he had just experienced a life-and-death battle. After Gina fell to the ground, she did not get into a fighting posture as quickly as the previous times. The broken collarbone directly made her unable to exert strength on her left side, and the broken bones had pierced her lungs and main arteries. Looking at Gina who was lying on the ground not far away and struggling to stand up, Wayne took a deep breath, his expression became very calm, and he slowly walked towards Gina. Gina, who was on the ground, saw Wayne approaching and crawled behind her with some difficulty. However, all her efforts were in vain. Wayne quickly walked in front of him. "Do you know what my wish was at that time?" Wayne's voice was very calm, as if he was talking to his old friend. Needless to say the specific time, Gina knew that Wayne must be talking about the days in the laboratory. Gina, who found that she could not change the outcome, slowly stopped struggling, raised her head and looked at Wayne coldly, and did not answer. I thought at that time, if one day our roles were reversed, I would repay you 1,000 times or 10,000 times the torture I suffered. Ignoring Gina's cold eyes, Wayne continued to talk to himself, recalling the most painful and darkest time in his life. But looking at you now, you are just as full of fear as I was back then. As he spoke, Wayne walked forward and looked at Gina, who had resigned herself to her fate on the ground, as if she saw herself at that time. Reaching out and holding Gina's head, Wayne suddenly twisted hard, and with a click, Gina finally fell softly to the ground. But the only difference between us is that I don't torture others for my own perverted pleasure. After breaking Gina's neck, Wayne made no other moves. Instead, he stood there and closed his eyes. Wayne couldn't help but recall the experience of being tortured in the laboratory. That painful experience was like a watershed in his life. After escaping from there, he was no longer the ordinary boy who grew up in an orphanage. In less than 2 months, not only has his body changed, but Wayne's mentality and worldview have also changed. The boy who once couldn't even kill a fish can now kill someone without any expression. Life. But Wayne has no regrets, because he knows that the people he kills are not harmless white lotuses, and the blood on the hands of everyone he kills will be no less than his. In this chaotic battlefield, Wayne's whole body seemed to have sunk into another space. He was the only one in this quiet space, and his thoughts slowly dispersed. Wayne suddenly remembered that there were 2 sentences in the book about the ancient Eastern philosophy that he read yesterday. One was to repay evil with kindness, and the other was to do to others what you want to do to yourself. In the past, when facing Gina's torture, Wayne wanted to die countless times. However, his strong recovery ability prevented him from even committing suicide. Now he actually gave what he always wanted to the person who had been tormenting him. Man, isn't this just repaying evil with kindness? He was indeed very good. With his eyes closed, Wayne was suddenly intoxicated with his good character. Bang! A gunshot interrupted the temporary calm on Wayne's side. Because Wayne and Gina had been fighting hand to hand, the soldiers had not fired in this direction to avoid accidental injuries. Now a soldier saw that Gina was dead and their target was standing there with eyes closed, so he shot Wayne without hesitation. Looking at the bullet that was squeezed out of his chest and fell to the ground, Wayne's face turned a little dark. He finally became intoxicated with himself. He didn't know which blind fool shot him. Don't they know that they are not afraid of bullets? Wayne raised his head and looked to the left, and saw the soldier holding a gun and preparing to run away from behind. However, Wayne, whose good mood was ruined, would not let him escape like this, so he chased him in this direction. As a young man with excellent moral character, Wayne plans to continue to persevere in his good character of repaying kindness with kindness. Since he can only continue to live in this terrible world due to his self-healing factor, then he has no choice but to do good deeds and send these people a gift. To meet their God. On the other side, Francis, who was originally ready to rescue Gina, but was entangled by Wade, saw the moment Gina died, and immediately began to retreat, out of the range of Wade's attack. Although the other party killed his most capable assistant, the most important thing is always his own life. Seeing that something was wrong, Francis directly abandoned the remaining soldiers who were still struggling to support Tony's fierce offensive, and ran towards the armored vehicle they came in without looking back. After Wade dealt with several soldiers who were trying to cover Francis's escape, Francis had already driven his car towards the city. Wayne, I'm going to chase Francis first. He ran towards the city. In a hurry, Wade could only shout in the direction of Wayne, and then chased in the direction where Francis left. 10 minutes later, with the combined efforts of Wayne and Tony, all the remaining soldiers were finally killed, and the 3 fat men trapped in the basement were successfully rescued. Afterwards, everyone spent a few more minutes and finally found a boss in this villa that was already riddled with holes. A boss was found in the kitchen. When Wayne and the others found him, they saw a boss covered in blood lying in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. Not far from him, there was a soldier lying with a kitchen knife stuck in his body. Looking at the fat man squatting next to a boss body in front of him, Wayne was about to say something to comfort him, but he didn't know how to speak. After thinking for a long time, he said, He was very brave and fought until the very end to protect everyone. A boss did protect everyone once again. During the battle just now, they did not notice when the soldier touched the villa. If a boss hadn't stood up bravely at that time, maybe Tony would have been attacked before he put on the armor, or maybe the three fat guys would have been hurt before they hid in the basement. Tony, who was standing next to him, noticed Wayne's embarrassment and quickly whispered to Pepper next to him. "Let's go after Francis, and you can comfort Steven." Seeing Pei Po nodded, he pulled Wayne on the other side out of the villa. "Let Pei Po and the others persuade us, our battle is not over yet." It was only then that Wayne realized that he seemed to have heard Wade shouting something just now. However, Wayne was busy repaying evil with kindness and did not listen carefully. Seeing Wayne's expression of reaction, Tony's originally heavy expression turned a little helpless. Francis ran toward the city, and Wade chased him ahead of time. "Okay, let's go quickly, I'm going to retaliate with kindness again." Wayne made a takeoff motion towards Tony, signaling Tony to take him off. Ignoring Wayne's strange words, in order to maintain speed, Tony took Wayne's arm with one hand, turned on the propeller under his feet, and flew towards the sky. This flying method of holding one hand can only be used by people with abnormal bodies like Wayne. An ordinary person's arm would not be able to withstand the huge pulling force during flight. "Will you fall again this time?" Seeing the underground buildings getting smaller and smaller, Wayne asked worriedly. However, before he could finish speaking, Tony's sudden acceleration caused Wayne to lose the chance to continue. "Find the location of the target we are tracking, Jarvis," Tony said as he flew towards the city. "Okay, Mr. Stark, the target is moving towards Stark Industries." Oh, Tony was a little surprised, and then his mind started to work rapidly. After the armor was completed, Tony had killed many militants in the Middle East who owned weapons produced by Stark Industries. However, he himself did not know when these transactions were completed. This proved that someone in the company was operating behind his back. What made him even more uncomfortable was that in the battle just now, he discovered that many of the weapons used by the enemy were also designed by him in the early days. Originally, he just wanted to help Wayne get revenge, but now it seems that some people within his company may have some secret transactions with that organization that he doesn't know about. Thinking of this, Tony no longer cared about Wayne's writing experience and directly increased the power to the maximum. He couldn't wait to see who the insider in his company was. On the other side, watching Francis drive farther and farther, Wayne, who was chasing after him, stopped, pulled off the mask on his head, and began to breathe heavily. He has been chasing for more than 10 minutes. Although his recovery ability has been greatly improved after possessing Wayne's genes, the long-term strenuous exercise has also taken a toll on his physical strength. Dee. Suddenly, there was a sound of horns behind him. Wade turned around subconsciously and saw a taxi slowly parked next to him. After rolling down the window, a familiar Indian face was revealed. A sweaty Wade asked, "Do you need help, sir?" "Cool." He quickly sat down and before Wade could speak, the Indian guy continued. "Sir, I've seen you before, and I know Dove. Well, Deadpool. Your name is really cool, sir. Are you after the legendary perverted duo?" Dauphin admired Wade's stage name while looking at the car in front of him that was gradually receding. As early as a few minutes ago, Dauphin had spotted a masked weirdo in tight clothes chasing a car in front of him. Only when Wade took off his mask did Dauphin recognize the customer. Recalling what this customer said when he came, he wanted to teach the perverted duo a lesson. Dauphin suddenly realized that this somewhat strange customer might be helping them, the poor taxi drivers, seek justice, so he took the initiative to come forward. Hearing Dauphin mention the perverted duo, Wade couldn't help but think of Wayne and the fat little Steven, and suddenly shuddered. But looking at Francis getting further and further away, Wade suddenly turned his attention back and said to the driver beside him, "Yes, Dauphin, help me catch up with him. You are the superhero of your taxi world." A superhero in the taxi world. Imagining Geeta's expression of admiration for him after he won this title, the young Indian driver's blood suddenly boiled. Pressing the accelerator to the bottom, the Indian guy seemed to be possessed by Schumacher, turned the taxi into an F1 racing car, and chased after the fleeing car ahead. Since it was late, there were not many cars on the street. 2 cars were speeding along the road, one after the other. Not long after, Francis stopped under a very eye-catching building. Okay, I will help you deal with this pervert today. Seeing Francis running out of the building, Wade, who was a step behind, jumped out of the open window, hurriedly said a word to the taxi driver, and hurriedly chased Francis in front. Bass. Wade, who has a self-healing factor, has adjusted his state to its peak during this time. Looking at Francis in front of him, Wade reached out and threw the knife in his right hand like a dart, just in time to stop Francis, who was about to enter the building. Taking advantage of Francis's pause, Wade dodged, holding a knife in both hands, and slashed towards Francis. Seeing the approaching blade, Francis, whose physical strength was a little weak, could only roll on the spot, avoiding Wade's attack with some difficulty. Ha 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 ha, you were not like this when you tortured me. Francis, didn't you feed today? Looking at Francis, who could barely hold on under his own offensive, Wade gritted his teeth and waved the knife in his hand harder. He was much more vindictive than Wayne, and he wanted to pay him back 1,000 times for the torture Francis had brought upon him. Base. As the scars on Francis's body increased and his movements became slower and slower, Wade stabbed the knife forward in his hand, passed through Francis's shoulder, and pinned him to the wall. Looking at the still trembling handle of the knife, Wade began to punch Francis in the face one after another, as if the impact of the punch to the flesh could better reflect his emotions, as if he was venting his long-standing feelings. Dissatisfaction is more like seeking justice for the past self. Ha ha ha, my pain nerves have been burned out a long time ago. Look at you, Wade, you look like a hurt wretch. Looking at Wade in front of him, Francis, who had been beaten to a bloody pulp, suddenly laughed. Then go to die. Wade also realized that his revengeful venting did not have the desired effect. He drew out the knife that had nailed Francis and was about to swing the knife at Francis's head. Boom! A huge metal fist suddenly appeared and knocked Wade away. Wade, who was in midair, thrust his knife into the ground beneath him, stopped the tendency of being knocked away, and looked at the third person who suddenly appeared. A huge silver armor appeared in front of Wade. Wade looked up at the big letters Stark on the top of the building, then looked at the armor that suddenly appeared, and asked with some confusion. Did you hit the wrong person, brother? Tony Stark and I are on the same team. Oh, Tony Stark is the one I want to kill. A mechanically processed sound came from the giant armor, and then he walked towards Wade with heavy steps. Looking at Francis, who took the opportunity to escape again, and the giant robot slowly approaching, Wade was a little anxious. Suddenly Wade glanced over and saw a meteor streaking across the sky, and hurriedly said to the big robot in front of him. Hey, big man, look, there are shooting stars in the sky behind you. Looking with some surprise at the robot that actually looked back at the meteor, Wade whispered, Shabby. Then he took advantage of this opportunity to bypass the robot and continued to chase Francis, who was escaping. At the same time, Tony, who was thinking all the way, could already see the towering Stark Tower in the distance. Through Jarvis's zoom, Tony could see an armored vehicle that had been slightly deformed from the collision and was parked in the building, nearby. It looks like they've gone in. Tony was thinking in his mind, and was about to land on the roof of the building. Suddenly, a laser shot out from under the eaves of the first floor of the building, hitting Tony's chest, knocking Tony out of the sky like a bird. In fact, Wayne had already seen the big iron lump hiding under the eaves of the first floor. The big iron lump seemed to be equipped with a device similar to that of avoiding radar searches. As a result, Jarvis did not discover him immediately, but this device does not affect Wayne's Superman's vision. However, Tony was flying too fast, and the huge wind resistance made Wayne want to warn Tony of the danger. When he opened his mouth, he could only take a mouthful of wind, making no sound at all. All he could do was watch a laser beam pass by him, and feel the familiar falling feeling. Wayne silently swore in his heart that this was definitely the last time he would take advantage of Tony in his life. Tony's big shit is so deceiving. Wayne and Tony fell heavily on the tiles in front of the building at the same time, smashing the thick tiles into pieces. Why does nothing good happen every time I take you with me? Tony climbed up from the ground with some difficulty, looked at the huge silver armor in front of him, and said to Wayne, who had already gotten up. Fortunately, he hit the building during the landing, which gave Tony a buffer. Otherwise, even if the armor had a shock-proof device, Tony, as an ordinary person, would still be seriously injured even if he did not die, and he would not be like now, just with some back pain. You are the evil one to complain first. I have seen this big iron bump a long time ago. It's all because you flew too fast. I can't even open my mouth. Seeing that Tony was still blaming himself, Wayne was a little unhappy. He took the Tony 3 times in total, but never landed safely. Wayne would not think that this was his own problem. This was obviously a quality problem with the products manufactured by the pseudo-genius scientist Tony. Tony was about to continue to accuse Wayne, but he couldn't stand the big iron bump over there. Different from Tony's slender armor, the armor he made was tall and powerful, but such a burly enemy was standing beside him. These two people can actually quarrel. Some people who couldn't stand it raised a missile launcher from their shoulders and fired a missile directly in Tony's direction. Although they seemed to be bickering with each other, Tony and Wayne's attention had always been on the enemy who knocked them out of the sky. The moment the missile was launched, Tony started the thruster and flew quickly to the right, avoiding the missile. Wayne, on the other hand, ran towards a pillar closer to the iron knot. When faced with such a large-scale destructive weapon, Wayne would not rush forward like an ordinary machine gun. Although the opponent's weapons may not kill him, Wayne does not want to taste the taste of missiles. Who are you and how did you get your reactor? After escaping the attack, Tony looked at the familiar light on the opponent's chest and asked towards the big iron lump that Wayne said. Ha ha ha, Tony, don't you know what you are facing now? Wayne hid behind a pillar and heard the conversation between Tony and Tai Liao. Suddenly, Tai Liao's voice sounded familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. You are Obadiah. At this time, Tony inside the armor looked shocked. The owner of the voice, Wayne, could not recognize it, but Tony knew the identity of the iron bump in front of him in an instant. And Tony's previous conjectures can be reasonably explained at this moment. Only Obadiah has the ability to do so many things behind his back. Yes, Tony, do you want to know where this thing came from? Obadiah pointed to the reactor that exuded a charming light in front of his chest. Although it was not suitable to speak at this time, he was able to successfully manipulate the genius Tony, which made Obadiah feel a little proud. His strong vanity made Obadiah a little proud. He explained his crime process in detail. You are indeed a genius, Tony, but using the stupidest methods to deal with geniuses is often very effective. In fact, Obadiah's method of obtaining the reactor was indeed the simplest method used. At first, Obadiah gathered all the outstanding scientists of the Stark Group, hoping that they could make a reduced reactor for himself. However, after half a month, the entire team had not made any progress, so Obadiah thought of another simpler way, which was to buy the nanny from Tony's family. Tony's family has more than one reactor. When Tony first used Wayne as a test subject, he specially made a reactor for Wayne that was fixed in front of the breastplate. After many experiments, the breastplate was already dilapidated. Tony will store most of the experimental waste in a separate small room and wait until it reaches a certain size before being destroyed together. The reactor on Obadiah's chest is exactly the one on the breastplate. Tony's experiment was only to test the defense of the breastplate, so he would avoid the reactor on the chest every time. This also meant that although the breastplate was in tatters, the reactor on it did not suffer any damage. Energy loss is getting worse. Currently, the remaining energy is 30. Tony was listening to Obadiah's story when suddenly Jarvis warned Tony. What's going on, Jarvis? The previous attack hit the reactor and caused damage to the reactor, causing the energy to begin to drain rapidly, Mr. Tony. At this moment, Tony also felt a little regretful. During the research process, Tony had strengthened and protected all parts of the armor, but he had forgotten the most important energy location. Raising his hand to shoot a laser at Obadiah, Tony didn't want to drag it out any longer. The loss of energy forced Tony to adopt a quick solution. Stretching out his left arm to block Tony's attack, Obadiah laughed and stopped talking to delay time. In fact, he had already thought of a strategy to defeat Tony. The first laser was aimed at the reactor. Now it seems that although it did not directly hit the reactor, it has already caused damage to the reactor. Although Obadiah is not a scientific researcher, he understands the most basic truth that as long as this kind of precision equipment is damaged, it will have a serious impact. Obadiah stretched out the missile on his left hand, and was about to aim in Tony's direction and start counterattack, when suddenly a figure rushed out from behind him. I saw Wayne slamming hard into Taizuda's back, and with a boom, the huge armor was knocked to the ground directly. At this time, Tony also cooperated and fired all the small ammunition loaded in the armor at once. After a fierce attack, Wayne rubbed his aching arm and frowned at the iron lump in front of him that stood up again. There was only a small hole of a few centimeters dented in the back where Wayne had hit him. Compared to the huge size, it was almost unharmed. The area hit by Tony's missile in front left only a few bullet marks, which could not damage the foundation of the armor at all. Ha ha ha, are you surprised, Tony? I have strengthened this armor. Obaday's wild laughter sounded in the iron knot, and then 2 more missiles were fired at Tony. But this time Tony's reaction was not as quick as last time. He didn't even choose to dodge, but raised his hands to resist. Fortunately, before the missile hit Tony, Wayne swooped down and avoided the missile attack with Tony. What's wrong with you? Looking at Tony beside him, Wayne asked with some confusion. There's something wrong with my reactor. Listening to the voice from Jarvis that the energy was only 5, Tony's face looked a little ugly. The energy loss was faster than he imagined, and many functions of the armor could no longer be used. What now? Wayne asked as he glanced at the reactor on Tony's chest, whose light was obviously dimmed. After a brief thought, Tony had to admit that although Obadiah's armor was very ugly, its defensive properties were indeed excellent. It was difficult to do any substantial damage to the armor with just the weapons on his body and Wayne's fists' damage. Chapter 31. We only have one solution now. Tony took a deep breath, ran to another pillar with Wayne, dodged another attack from Obadiah, and then continued. You go down now, and when I lead him to the reactor, turn on all the switches in the reactor. We need to overload the reactor. It's better that you go down. I'll lead him there, Wayne said after taking a look at the damage on Tony's reactor. His target was me, Tony growled lowly at Wayne. But I don't know what a reactor is. Wayne made a confused expression at Tony, and then ran directly towards Obadiah. With his ability to move quickly, Wayne constantly used pillars or walls to avoid Obadiah's missiles and bullets. Whenever Obadiah starts to look for Tony, Wayne will throw some flower pots and blown stones at Obadiah. Although it cannot cause damage to the armor, the stones thrown by Wayne with all his strength, the power is comparable to bullets. Wayne's constant harassment successfully attracted Oyashiro's attention and temporarily gave up the idea of looking for Tony. Looking at Wayne, who was already entangled with Obadiah, Tony did not continue to show off. Instead, he ran to a hidden place and took off his armor. The remaining energy was no longer enough to support the armor's operation for a longer time. Wearing the armor would instead limit Tony's movements. Wayne took the initiative because he saw Tony's slow movements when dodging the previous 2 attacks. If Tony was on top, Tony would have gone to see God before he could walk down. Seeing that Tony had successfully entered Stark Tower, Wayne began to take the initiative. After this period of harassment, he had discovered the shortcomings of this big iron lump. His excessive pursuit of defense and size made Obadiah ignore it. The flexibility of this armor. And this was Wayne's chance to fight back. After dodging the missile again, Wayne did not continue to run behind the next obstacle. Instead, he quickly rushed to Obadiah's side when Obadiah aimed at him again. The close distance made Obadiah's missiles useless, otherwise it would blow up Wayne and himself at the same time, so Obadiah could only control the robot to punch continuously. I want to fight off this annoying little monkey in front of me. However, the imagined scene of the little monkey being knocked away did not appear. I saw Wayne stretching out a hand to catch the huge steel fist, and the 2 hands, one large and one small, with huge differences in size, were frozen in the air. Haha, it's time to test the limits of your strength. Haven't you had enough to eat? Feeling the endless power in his body, Wayne smiled and said to Obadiah in the armor. Although the tiles under his feet were already cracked under the heavy load, Wayne still firmly grasped Obadiah's iron fist. In fact, Wayne himself didn't know the limit of his strength. The last time he lifted a car was actually far from the limit of Wayne's strength. Later, Tony devoted himself to the research and development of armor and did not continue to help Wei. Well completed the test. Mutants. In fact, Obadiah's target has always been Tony. Since Tony already knows his true identity, Tony cannot be allowed to go back alive today. Anyway, the organization promised to help him deal with the impact of killing Tony. As long as he kills Tony today, the Stark Group will be able to change its name to the Obadiah Group tomorrow, so he will take the initiative to expose himself today. However, the mutant with Tony completely restricted his actions. The hands and shoulders of the armor suddenly opened, revealing the loaded ammunition inside. The somewhat impatient Obadiah no longer cared about whether the missile would hurt both sides. He just wanted to get rid of this mutant and then kill Tony. The moment the ammunition was exposed, Wayne reacted quickly, released his huge mechanical fist, jumped hard, lay on the back of the iron lump, and hit the iron head of the armor hard. One punch. Ouch! Obadiah, who was hiding in the armor, felt his head shake slightly, but Wayne outside shouted loudly. Looking at the iron plate with a punch mark dented in it, and feeling the excruciating pain in his hand bones, Wayne no longer dared to use his weak hands to attack this iron bump. It was really not cost-effective. In order to be able to defeat Tony, Okuyashira did not worry at all about the materials used in the armor. All he used were the hardest materials he could buy. "Are you a fool?" A somewhat angry Wayne cursed, and then he saw the gap as wide as a fist in the neck of the armor, and his eyes lit up slightly. Click, click. Obadiah, who was struggling to get Wayne off his back, suddenly felt his vision go dark and yelled in horror. "What are you doing?" At this time, Obadiah no longer had the invincible momentum he had when he first appeared on the stage. He gradually felt powerless against Wayne on his back. The opponent's agile movements and abnormal healing ability made him somewhat helpless. "I'm helping you clean up the wires. Didn't your mother tell you that all the wires at home should be arranged neatly?" As he spoke, Wayne pulled out a black line connected to something unknown from the armor, and then jumped off the armor. The wires that Wayne accidentally tore off caused Obadiah to completely lose all sense of the outside world. Now he can only blindly control the armor and wave it around randomly. What's more important is that he doesn't dare to open the armor and use his naked eyes to observe the outside. He knows that once the armor is gone, the violent mutant outside will definitely crush him into a pulp. Looking at the iron knots fighting in the air not far away, Wayne froze in place as if remembering something. Then he smiled disdainfully, raised his head at a 45-degree angle, looked up at the sky, and said slowly, "Being invincible is really lonely." After the routine installation was completed, Wayne trotted leisurely to the top of the reactor. Through the transparent glass, he happened to see Tony playing with various complicated switches below. After breaking one of the windows, Wayne shouted to Tony below, "Are you ready?" Tony, who was anxiously adjusting the power, was startled by the sudden appearance from above. When he subconsciously looked up, he saw Wayne sticking his head in with a curious expression on his face. "That's almost it. Where is Obadiah? Aren't you guys fighting? He is dancing in the air. Listen to my 1, 2, 3, and you can start." After receiving Tony's affirmative reply, Wayne made an okay gesture to Tony, and then ran towards Obadiah without looking back. 1. Taking advantage of a flaw revealed by Obadiah's wild swing, Wayne lowered his body to avoid the waving arm and ran in front of Obadiah. 2. A somewhat desperate Obadiah was continuing to fight against the air. Suddenly he felt that the entire machine seemed to be lifted upwards. At this time, Wayne had grabbed Obadiah's waist with both hands and lifted the entire armor. 3. After Wayne lifted Obadiah up, he did not pause. Instead, his face turned red and he used all his strength to throw Obadiah above the reactor. Bang! As soon as Obadiah flew over the reactor, a huge energy beam shot up into the sky. At the center of the beam, Obadiah couldn't even let out a scream. His whole body and armor turned into a ghost in the air, dust. "Where did you get Obadiah and his big ass?" A few minutes later, Tony ran out of the building panting. After looking around with some caution, he asked Wayne, who was sitting on the ground. "He is probably by your side now." Looking at Tony with some confusion, Wayne replied. Tony glanced around silently again, and then looked at Wayne again, waiting for Wayne to give him an explanation. With such a violent energy wave, he must have been broken down into dust by now and drifted away in the wind. Although he was a little confused as to why Tony was asking such nonsense, Wayne still patiently explained. "So, did you throw him into the energy column that just erupted?" Tony's face turned dark when he finally reacted. "Isn't that what you said?" Facing Tony's successive mental retardation problems, Wayne became a little impatient. Isn't this your own plan? Why are you starting to act stupid now? What I mean is, guide him near the reactor, and interfere with the circuits of his armor through the ability exploded by overload. Halfway through speaking, Tony stopped and rubbed his somewhat swollen forehead. Tony's original idea was just to capture Obadi, but unexpectedly, he was killed directly by a strange combination of circumstances. But since the person is dead, there is no point in talking about anything else. Betrayal from a friend is often more infuriating than injury from an enemy. The various deals Obadiah made behind Tony's back in his attempt to kill him this time have made Tony hate him to the core. Francis and Wade, as Obadiah also a member of the organization. Ignoring the imbecile behavior of pseudo-genius Tony, Wayne thought of their purpose here. Obadiah should not be from that organization. From what I know about him, they may just have a cooperative relationship. Tony explained to Wayne that although Obadiah had made many transactions without telling him, based on his knowledge of Obadiah over the past few decades, Obadiah was only pursuing money and was not interested in joining this evil. There wasn't much interest from the organization. What you know about him? Glancing sideways at Tony who was explaining, Wayne saw 3 words, unreliable, written in big words on his face. Hey guys. At this moment, Wade, wearing a red tight suit, popped out from nowhere and interrupted the conversation between Tony and Wayne. He was seen holding an arm that was still bleeding. This is, Wayne asked as he stood up and pointed at Wade's hand. This is Francis's girlfriend. Although I didn't catch Francis, we can use his girlfriend to lure him out. Seeing that Wayne and Tony didn't speak, for fear that they would think it was him who failed to catch Francis, Wade quickly defended himself. Originally I had caught that fool, but a big robot suddenly appeared and stopped me. Fortunately, I was keenly aware of a meteor streaking across the sky, so I said to the big robot, "Look behind you, there is a shooting star." Quote. In the end, that stupid guy actually fired a laser at the sky to hit the meteors in the sky. I took advantage of his opportunity to hit the meteors and secretly followed Francis. After a fierce battle, I left his daughter behind. Friend, by the way, where is the big robot? As he spoke, Wade looked around, as if wondering why such a big thing suddenly disappeared. So, we were beaten down because of you. Wayne's mouth twitched. Tony hadn't reacted at first, but when he heard Wayne say it, Tony realized that the shooting star Wade was talking about was probably him and Wayne. That is to say, in fact, they could have landed smoothly. Obadiah did not discover them in advance, and the person who exposed their whereabouts happened to be Wade, who was talking so loudly in front of them. You are awesome. Tony said something in black that knocked Wade down, which immediately made Wade, who had stopped, become excited again, and continued to describe his fierce battle process and his heroic performance today to Wayne and Tony. Tony felt a little lucky at the moment. He looked at Wayne and then at Wade. Fortunately, he didn't join Wayne's team. Otherwise, facing such teammates, Tony felt that the next fight might be the last in his life. But Wayne was a little desperate at the moment. As early as when Wade came to the villa, Wayne invited Wade, who was also eager for money, to become the 3rd member of his team. But now it seems that apart from his wise captain, the other 2 people in his team don't seem to have online IQs. Yes, Wayne didn't realize that he was also a scammer in Tony's eyes. He had always known himself as wise and powerful, and today he discovered that he also had the excellent character of repaying evil with kindness. Early the next morning, Wayne closed the e-book he was reading on his phone and began to wake up Tony and Wade who were sleeping one by one. In this battle, because Francis escaped again and both Gina and Obadiah were dead, their original plan failed again. So Wayne hopes to go to the orphanage again to see if he can find other clues and rescue the orphans who don't know yet. The black Rolls-Royce stopped at the entrance of the orphanage. Tony took the initiative to act as their driver this time. Since discovering that Stark Industries was related to the organization, Tony has become more interested in matters related to the organization. Although he didn't know how many evil organizations Obadiah had made deals with behind his back, but whenever he thought that he might become an accomplice in murdering orphans, Tony became even more disgusted with those evil organizations. Now he can only try his best to make up for the people who were hurt because of his own reasons. No security guard came forward to stop them, and the 3 of them walked into the gate of the orphanage smoothly. Is your welfare home always so deserted? Wade, who was walking at the front, looked at the silent orphanage in front of him. There was not a single person in sight, and there were no lights on the buildings in the distance. Something is wrong. Wayne, who was walking behind him, turned on his cell phone and looked at the current time. It was 8 o'clock sharp. Usually, the orphans would have already gotten up at this time. Some orphans who like to exercise have even completed their morning exercises at this time. With doubts, the three of them began to wander around the orphanage. However, after walking around for a full circle, they discovered to their surprise that everyone in the orphanage seemed to have disappeared overnight, whether they were orphans or residents. Staff, teachers and security guards were all missing. I'm afraid they have moved. Tony frowned as he concluded their search. It was obvious that Francis or someone else in the organization had already ordered the entire orphanage to be transferred. But their trip this time was equivalent to a wasted trip, and currently all clues about the organization have been disconnected. Fake. Wayne couldn't help but curse. Wayne's gaffe was not because he had no clues about the organization, but because he was worried about the safety of the orphans. Although Wayne did not have a deep friendship with those orphans, they were friends who grew up together after all, and according to Francis and the organization, due to their urinary nature, the fate of these orphans is obviously grim. The first thing Wayne did when he came back from the orphanage was to pull the little fat man out of bed, who was still immersed in grief. I hope to use little fatty's ability to see if he can find traces of the orphans through street videos and other channels. It can't be found. The street cameras in the nearby blocks were all destroyed after we escaped from the orphanage that night. With messy hair on his head, the little fat man said to Wayne next to him with red eyes. Okay, Steven, you can't go on like this. Wayne had long been mentally prepared for this outcome. According to current understanding, the energy of this organization was very huge, so since he decided to withdraw, he would not leave such obvious flaws for them to discover. Now that the clues have been cut off for the time being, Wayne no longer continues to struggle. He is not a stubborn person. Instead, it can be said that he is a little big-hearted or forgetful. For things that cannot be solved temporarily, no matter how much hatred he has, he can put it down temporarily and focus on the things in front of him. For example, when he first escaped from Francis, during the first time he met Tony, Wayne never thought about how to retaliate against Francis or how to find clues about the organization after returning. Of course, this doesn't mean that Wayne has forgotten his hatred, it just means that his brain capacity is limited. At this moment, Wayne thought that he should persuade his friend to help him find something serious to do, and he could not let him give up on himself like this again. Then what else can I do? The little fat man said with some dejection. In several consecutive battles, he could only watch Wayne and the others fight bloody battles, while he himself could only act like a woman, hiding in the basement and shivering. This feeling made him somewhat unspeakably uncomfortable. Tony definitely needs your help, you are the king of the hacker world. He patted the little fat man on the shoulder as an encouragement. Before the little fat man could express anything, Wayne forcibly pulled the little fat man up and walked towards Tony's laboratory. At this moment, Tony is busy in his laboratory renovating the villa. This attack sounded a wake-up call for Tony, who had recently obtained armor and was somewhat complacent. Although he can even have a 50-50 fight with Wayne when wearing armor, if he takes off this armor, he is just an ordinary person, and any well-trained ordinary soldier can end his life. And he can't hide in the armor 24 hours a day, so he now needs to strengthen the defense system of his villa. He didn't want a bomb to fly from behind him next time he was drinking coffee on the couch. While Tony was thinking about how to better distribute the defense system, he saw Wayne dragging the disheveled fat man down. Tony, I heard that you are improving the defense system. Is there anything Steven can help with? Wayne, who was walking in front, winked at Tony and then asked. Well, his ability can indeed help me in many ways. How about giving me a try, Steven? Tony understood what Wayne meant. In fact, in Tony's opinion, the little fat man's powers were actually very powerful. The little fat man's ability is like a god in the internet world. One person can be worth an entire network security department. You must know that those large organizations spend astronomical amounts of money every year to maintain the security of their own networks. And with Fatty's ability, he can quickly create a more stable artificial intelligence system. For example, Jarvis, which Tony is currently building, can be upgraded more quickly with Fatty's help. There are many other functions that Little Fatty has not discovered yet. Tony believes that if he can fully activate Little Fatty's abilities, then Little Fatty can even maintain the entire world's network environment by himself. Okay. Hearing Tony's invitation, the little fat man finally cheered up. Not only because Tony is Fatty's idol, but also because Little Fatty hopes to prove his ability. He hopes to provide more help to Wayne and the others, instead of being like a waste that can only hold everyone back. Seeing the little fat man joining Tony's busy ranks, Wayne joined in the fun for a while, but was kicked out by the two people with some disgust. Tony didn't want to deal with a curious baby who found everything magical when he saw it. Wayne's 100,000 whys seriously affected Tony's thinking and work efficiency. Crossing the river and tearing down the bridge. Wayne was thinking quietly while holding a glass of water, sitting alone on the sofa upstairs, looking at the decoration workers who were repairing the wall, and slowly fell into deep thought. In this battle, Wayne discovered many of his shortcomings. Because his strength and speed were far superior to ordinary people, Wayne did not find any problems with his fighting methods when facing ordinary soldiers in the past. But this time, after fighting with Gina and Obadiah, Wayne discovered that he might not have performed as well as he should have. His lack of fighting skills meant that when he faced Gina, who was weaker than him in all aspects, he was beaten so hard that he had no room to fight back. In the end, he could only rely on his own self-healing ability and the ability to exchange injuries for injuries. He finally defeated Gina in a rogue way. But in the battle with Obadiah, facing a big iron lump like a turtle, his single attack method could not even cause threatening damage to it. He could only be like a wolf that wanted to eat a hedgehog, not knowing where to start. Mouth. How can we solve these problems? Wayne muttered to himself in confusion. His current ideal is to build a team and surpass Tony in terms of wealth. As the captain, he must have super combat ability. Otherwise, how to complete various difficult tasks, how to earn more money, and how to become the richest man in the world. As he was thinking about it, Wayne's eyes suddenly lit up and he forgot about Wade's existence. Wade is a senior mercenary. He is very good in both marksmanship and combat skills. In the previous battle, Wayne could clearly see that although Wade did not have various physical enhancements, he could kill enemies far faster. Be faster than yourself. Since there is a ready-made teacher, of course we cannot let him go. Wayne drank the water in front of him and stood up to talk to Wade outside about his responsibilities and obligations as a member of the team. When Wayne found Wade, Wade was lying on a big rock on the beach wearing his beach travel attire, and kept saying something to Vanessa next to him. Hey, Wade, I need to talk to you about something. Wayne suddenly appeared and directly interrupted Wade's speech. Looking at Wade, who looked unhappy, and Vanessa, who breathed a sigh of relief, Wayne asked curiously. What are you talking about? The great Mr. Deadpool is repeating to me for the 12th time how he heroically cut off Francis's arm. Vanessa rolled her eyes and answered before Wade could. Since Wade came back to her this time, she found that Wade, who had the potential to be a talker, seemed to have been stimulated by his previous recessive genes and became even more talkative. If you don't interrupt him, he can talk in front of you. Talk all day long. I'm doing this to make up for the time I didn't talk to you in the past few months. Seeing Vanessa's disgusted expression, Wade said a little hurt. Okay, I'm here to talk to you about business. After interrupting Wade's lame explanation, Wayne continued to speak to him seriously. I think it's time for you to fulfill your responsibilities and obligations as a member of the team. What responsibilities and obligations? Wade looked at Wayne in front of him in confusion, suddenly having an ominous premonition. When Wayne invited him to join the team, he didn't mention any responsibilities and obligations to him. Wayne just explained to him the team's great goal of surpassing Tony Stark in wealth, and Wade agreed to Wayne without hesitation. After all, in his opinion, it would be best if he could make money in the future. If he couldn't make money, he wouldn't suffer any loss. As a result, now that Wayne suddenly mentioned his responsibilities and obligations to him, he suddenly felt nervous. Do you need to pay to join the team? Seeing that Wayne didn't speak, Wade asked tentatively. If he really had to pay, he would choose to quit without hesitation. Haha, you don't have to pay, but it's really a good idea. Wayne deliberately remained silent for a while. He was originally planning to take a closer look at Wade's worried expression, but when he heard Wade's words, his eyes suddenly lit up and he couldn't help but feel a little moved. But then I thought about it. After all, Wade still needs to train him voluntarily. At this time, I am really embarrassed to ask Wade for money, but the players who will join in the future can develop. Seeing Wade's expression turning from danger to relief, Wayne organized his words and continued. Look, as teammates, we should help others when we see them in trouble. Exactly. Wade nodded quickly and said, as long as no money is given, everything else is easy to negotiate. So, I now find that I have a problem with my fighting skills. I need you to teach me 5 hours a day. How about? Seeing that Wade agreed so readily, Wayne silently increased the originally planned 3 hours to 5 hours. After hearing Wayne's request, Wade wanted to slap himself. After finally having the opportunity to be with Vanessa every day, Wade was not willing to waste a few hours every day on Wayne. Wade gave a subtle wink to Vanessa next to him, signaling Vanessa to help him reject Wayne's request. Okay, I agreed for him. In Wade's confused expression, Vanessa directly agreed to Wayne's request on Wade's behalf. It's not that Vanessa misunderstood Wade's hint, but because Vanessa has always been grateful to Wayne. Wade once told her that if he hadn't obtained Wayne's genes, he might be already dead, and now although Wade has suffered all kinds of torture, at least Wayne's genes have allowed him to survive. Secondly, although Vanessa loves Wade very much, she still can't stand Wade's many words that sound like flies. So the 5 hours Wade trains Wayne every day can also make her a little cleaner. After receiving a positive answer, Wayne did not stay here to act as a light bulb, but ran back happily to prepare for tomorrow's training. It gave the long-separated couple more time alone. Early the next morning, Wayne ran to the door of Wade's room as soon as he got up. In order to get up early, Wayne spent less than an hour reading e-books yesterday. Bang bang bang. Knocking hard on the door, Wayne looked forward to today's training. 10 minutes later, the door to the room was finally opened, revealing a reluctant Wade. He glanced at the excited Wayne, and Wade walked in front without saying a word. Their training venue was chosen on the beach outside the villa. What do we start with? When he arrived at the beach, Wayne looked at Wade expectantly. Wayne felt that the protagonist in the fantasy he wanted to watch now met an old man, and his combat power was about to increase by leaps and bounds. Yes, although Wayne now spends more and more time reading e-books every day, he has long forgotten the original intention of reading books and is happily addicted to the endless internet. Well, because of the special characteristics of your body, I have customized a training pattern for you. At this moment, Wade finally came to his senses, looked at Wayne with a wicked smile, and briefly did some warm-up actions. Then, when Wayne was still about to ask something, he suddenly rushed out and kicked the man who still didn't react. Come on, Wayne. Wayne, who was about to speak, saw Wade suddenly rushing over, feeling a sharp pain in his stomach, and then his whole body flew backwards and fell heavily to the ground. What are you doing? Wayne, who was lying on the ground, rubbed his stomach and shouted angrily at Wade, that's not how the script was written. Today's training has begun. You have to pay attention at all times, okay? Then before Wayne could stand still, Wade rushed in front of Wayne a few more steps, grabbed one of Wayne's arms, threw him over his shoulder, and knocked Wayne to the ground again. Being inexplicably knocked down by Wade twice in a row made Wayne's anger completely explode. Looking at Wade charging towards him again, Wayne stood up suddenly, hugged Wade's waist with both hands, and lifted him up. Wade, who was under control, did not panic at all, but raised his knee and directly aimed at Wayne's heart and hit it hard. Wayne, whose vital part was hit, suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart, and subconsciously let go of the hands controlling Wade. Wade, who regained his mobility, did not let Wayne go, but launched another round of attacks on Wayne's unprepared head. If I were at your level before, I would have died over 800 times. Wade taunted Wayne as he watched him fall to the ground again. Just now, Wade easily knocked down Wayne 3 times without even using his full strength. If this was on the battlefield, this means that Wayne has died 3 times. Of course, the premise is that Wayne has not awakened his powers. Down. At this time, Wade also discovered that Wayne not only had no fighting skills, but also did not know how to better protect himself when facing attacks. I can't die. Wayne, who was lying on the ground, said unconvinced. Wayne was actually very dissatisfied with his performance just now. Facing Wade's continuous blows like a sudden rain, he didn't know how to resist. Listen to me, Wayne. You may think that with your powers, no one in this world can threaten your life, but what if someone is targeting your friends? You expect to spend decades with your life force, will time kill them? Wade slowly walked next to Wayne, looked at the unconvinced Wayne lying on the ground, and said somewhat seriously. Or, they don't want to kill you, they just want to capture you and torture you, like Francis did. After hearing Wade's words, Wayne clenched his fist subconsciously and fell into silence. If he could have done better, a boss might not have died a few days ago when Ethan was in the cave, and Francis might not have had the chance to escape. In the final analysis, it was still because he was not strong enough. What's more, we are the ones who want to make a lot of money. Seeing Wayne's expression changing, Wade returned to his usual relaxed tone. He knew that he had achieved his goal, and the main purpose of today's training was to change Wayne's mentality. Although Wayne has experienced some battles, compared with a real warrior, what Wayne lacks is his belief in wanting to become stronger. So, do you want to come again? The training method I designed for you is to constantly fight with me. Whenever you beat me, you will be ready. The premise is that you are not allowed to use your strange power. Wade rubbed his sore wrist and said while extending his hand to Wayne. In the fight just now, it seemed that he was the one who hit Wayne and was unable to fight back. In fact, Wayne's unreasonable strength also had a great impact on him. Holding Wade's outstretched hand, before Wade could react, the next moment Wayne suddenly jerked and knocked Wade to the ground neatly. Don't you know you need to be alert at all times? Wayne squinted his eyes, looked at Wade who fell to the ground and smiled. A month has passed inadvertently. During this month, Wayne spent 5 hours every day sparring with Wade. Two people who also have the ability to recover did not have to worry about hurting each other during sparring, so whether it was Wayne, Wade is still ruthless when taking action. For the rest of the time, Wayne was completely immersed in the world of books. According to Wayne's newly learned words, there are two types of spiritual practice. As an excellent captain, he not only needs to train his physical body, but also constantly maintain the cultivation of his soul. In this era, dual cultivation is king. Although he himself couldn't figure out what the Eastern people meant by soul, it didn't stop him from wandering in the sea of books. In the first half month of sparring, Wade relied on his many years of experience and skills to suppress Wayne. Especially from the 5th day, Vanessa, who was somewhat bored, came to watch the two of them every day, training. This made Wade feel like he was on fire during the sparring, and he used all his strength to beat Wayne back step by step. But starting from the 15th day, Wade gradually began to have difficulty facing Wayne. He had to admit that Wayne was indeed gifted in fighting. It was also from that day that Wade, who felt a little bad, banned Vanessa from coming to watch the game every day, saying that he was about to start secret training. By the 20th day, Wayne was able to fight to a tie with Wade. No matter what moves Wade used, Wayne could parry them one by one. This also led Wade to make some adjustments to the teaching model and began to include the teaching of knife-setting techniques. This change allowed Wade to regain the feeling of torturing food at the beginning. Wayne holding the knife not only did not become more threatening, but instead made himself somewhat constrained. Facing Wade's superb knife skills, Wayne I can only go out with clothes on and come back naked every day. Clang. On the beach at the seaside, two knives reflecting dazzling light came to a temporary stalemate after 10 minutes of fighting. Hey, don't even think about going back in pants today. Wayne gritted his teeth and looked at Wade in front of him, the well-developed muscles on his arms holding the handle of the knife bulging high. Ever since he started using weapons, Wayne would sneak into his room naked and dejected after every training session. Although Wade always said it was because the sword had no eyes, Wayne just felt that this guy must have done it on purpose, otherwise any sparring partner would always say hello to you. Bare butt boy, you think too much. Wade's face turned a little red and he gasped and replied. Wayne's strength was far beyond him. Although Wayne would deliberately control his strength during training in order to achieve the purpose of training, it was still difficult for Wade to resist. As soon as he finished speaking, Wade tilted the blade of the knife, and while releasing the force, he slashed towards Wayne's left leg in the direction the knife had cut. However, Wayne had already been on guard. He jumped up, dodged the attack, and slashed at Wayne with the knife in both hands. This time, Wade didn't dare to take the hit. Wayne was already stronger than him, and he was still condescending, so Wade could only roll to the left in a hurry. Cheer! There was a sound of clothes being torn. Although Wade dodged in a hurry, he dodged Wayne's head-on attack in time, but his pants happened to be within the range of Wayne's attack while dodging. Of course, Wayne, who had been waiting for this moment for several days, would not miss this opportunity. He cut it off with a decisive stroke, revealing Wade's pink Hello Kitty underwear. Getting up from the ground, Wade quickly dropped the knife in his hand, covered his butt with both hands, and subconsciously looked back in the direction of the villa. Sure enough, a mirror reflection flashed out of the window of his room. Ever since Wade tricked Vanessa into not watching anymore, Wayne, who realized Wade's true purpose, certainly wouldn't let him succeed. So Wayne privately asked Tony for the most advanced military telescope currently available in the military, and gave it to Vanessa so that Vanessa could capture every moment of Wade's life more clearly, such as now. Okay, you're out of business for the time being. Wade ran back in despair. He wanted to explain to Vanessa that this was a complete accident. The powerful Mr. Deadpool would not lose to a young boy like Wayne. Call. Walking over to pick up the knife Wade dropped, Wayne couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Over this period of time, 5 hours of high-intensity training every day has allowed Wayne to completely grow into a qualified fighter. Even though Wayne has only trained for a month and only trained for 5 hours a day, you think he can only learn a little bit. Wade knew from the beginning that he would not be able to spend several years slowly letting Wayne grow up, so based on the special characteristics of the two people's bodies, Wade wisely chose to use life and death fighting to quickly let Wayne grow up, stand up. In other words, Wayne has experienced more than 100 life and death struggles in the past month. Although they will not really die, they will still feel pain. When the other party stabs your heart with a knife, even if you know that you may not die, the sensory and psychological impact of this process is the same as that of ordinary people. This is one of the reasons why Wade didn't let Vanessa watch. His fight with Wayne was indeed too bloody at times. Looking at Wade running away, Wayne couldn't help but think of himself on the first day of sparring with Wayne a month ago, fighting like a baby. However, a month later, he was able to defeat Wade head-on while suppressing his strength and speed to the level of an ordinary person. This speed of progress was not unsatisfactory. Why is life as lonely as snow? After standing there and posing for a while, Wayne sighed and walked toward the villa with brisk steps. Back in the villa, Wayne was somewhat surprised to see Tony and the little fat man lying leisurely on the sofa, drinking coffee and chatting. Because he successfully defeated Wade today, the training ended early. Normally during this time, Tony and the little fat man would stay in the laboratory below, tinkering with something that Wayne couldn't understand. "You don't have to mess around today?" Wayne asked curiously. Since Wayne couldn't understand what Tony and the little fat man were doing at all, he directly defined their work as nonsense. "The defense system has been deployed. If those people from last time came here now, I guarantee that they would have been beaten to ashes before they even got within 100 meters of the villa." Tony, who was leaning on the sofa, rolled his eyes and then said a little show-off. During this period of time, Tony not only temporarily stopped researching the armor, but also handed over all work related to Stark Industries to Pepper, while he devoted himself to the construction of the villa's defense system. After a month of hard work by Tony and the little fat man, he can guarantee that his villa is now probably the most defensive private residence in the world. Ding ding ding. At this moment, Tony's phone suddenly rang. "Hey, what's the matter?" Tony picked up the phone and said, and carefully gave the meaning of the defense system of the Weinkopp Villa, which was simply playing the piano to an aux. "Can't I not go?" "Okay, I'll be there soon." After hanging up the phone, Tony shook his head and looked helplessly at Wayne and the little fat man who were doing nothing next to him. Pepper's phone number. As you know, he has been handling the group's affairs during this period. There is a press conference this afternoon. Do you want to go out and relax? Tony suggested that since he couldn't escape, he should at least pull two people behind him. In fact, after this period of getting along, the relationship between everyone is very harmonious. After all, we have lived and worked together under the same roof for more than a month. Not to mention the Wayne he met first, in Tony's heart, from the moment Wayne ran out to delay time for him in the cave without authorization, Tony regarded Wayne as his relative. Although Wayne already had the ability to heal himself at the time, the fact that a child who had never been on a battlefield could take the initiative to rush forward at that moment showed Wayne's determination. Of course, due to his age, Wayne can only be regarded as his nephew in Tony's mind. As for the little fat man, Tony was originally just amazed by his abilities, but after a month of cooperation and understanding, Tony also regarded the little fat man as a qualified partner. In the past, Tony had always been in the laboratory and in the beds of famous models, so that Tony, who was rich and wealthy, had few close friends, so Tony cherished these rare friendships in his heart. No comment. When Wayne and the little fat man heard Tony's proposal, their eyes lit up and they agreed in unison. The two young men, who were in their adolescence, loved to play. During this period of time, they have long been tired of living without going out. Now, they are very happy to hear that they can go to the press conference. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day, Tony, Wayne and the little fat man arrived at the Stark Group's press conference room on time. As soon as the three of them got out of the car, they saw Xiaojiao, who had been waiting for a long time, walking over with her assistant. "It's surprising that you're not late today." Pepper was wearing an exquisite professional attire and looked at Tony in front of him with a hint of teasing. "Hey." Tony sighed, tightened his tie, looked at the excited Wayne and the little fat man next to him, and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Originally, according to Playboy Tony's character, he would postpone the press conference at 4 p.m. until p.m. However, just as he was lying on the big soft bed, preparing to take a nice nap, Wayne and the little fat man, who had already dressed up, directly pulled Tony up from the bed. "Ha ha ha, okay, all the questions you may be asked today and the standard answers are on this note. There are still a few minutes left. You can read it first, and you can go up and read it later." Pepper covered her mouth and smiled secretly, then took out a white note from her bag and handed it to Tony. The main reason for holding a press conference at Stark Group today is that the last scene of Wayne and Tony fighting Obadiah was photographed by busybodies and published by major newspapers. Since the last time Tony announced the closure of Stark Industries' weapons department, Stark Group has been at the forefront of the storm, and every bit of news about Stark Group will be watched by a wide audience. So even though Wayne and the others had been keeping a deaf ear to what was going on in the villa for the past month, ever since these photos were taken and published in the newspapers, the American media and the interested public have been making a fuss about this matter. Some media and the public even believe that Tony's closure of the weapons department is just a cover, with the purpose of secretly researching this kind of humanoid weapon with unknown uses. During this period of time, these news have had a great impact on Stark Group, causing the group's stock to trend downward again after falling to the bottom last time. That's why Pepe had to find Tony to explain this matter to the media and citizens. Following Tony and Pepper, Wayne looked around curiously. Although this was not the first time he followed Tony to the press conference, it was the first time he entered the infield. Last time, he just watched from a distance and met a somewhat bald agent. "Hello everyone." Tony, who had held more press conferences than he had eaten, stood on the podium with a relaxed look on his face, facing reporters from dozens of different media below, and waved with ease. Tony's appearance instantly ignited the reporters' enthusiasm, and they began to ask questions about the humanoid robot. The good guys called it Iron Man. Everyone wanted to know the specific identity of Iron Man. Watching Tony face all kinds of tricky questions on the podium with ease, he very cleverly resolved the problems that were not good for him one by one. Then he looked at Pei Po next to him with an admiring look on his face. Wayne suddenly felt a little frustrated. Although he had studied a lot about how to maintain a high profile during this period, there was still a certain gap compared with a noble man like Tony. But the next second, Wayne thought of his team's lofty goal again, and the blood in his heart was ignited again. Looking at Tony, who was scolding Fang Chu in front of him, Wayne felt that as the captain, he shouldn't give in so easily. Just as he said, Wayne lowered his head silently, took out his mobile phone from his pocket, searched for the keyword, language, and looked at the rows of books that appeared. Wayne silently clicked and collected 3 books: The Art of Words, The Complete Collection of Tasty Words, and How to Use Words to Attack Your Enemies. At this time, we are facing more and more questions from reporters. Tony's face gradually showed an expression of impatience. You mean, Iron Man is an artificial intelligence bodyguard? Facing a question from a female reporter, Tony stretched out his hands and made a gesture to signal everyone to quiet down. Looking at the hall that was getting quieter, Tony straightened his tie, threw the note in his hand on the ground, raised his head and said something to the camera next to him. I am Iron Man. Wow. As Tony's words fell, the venue that had just been silent for a moment instantly erupted in deafening exclamations. The reporters below all had their eyes red with excitement. Tony's answer made them feel that their month of waiting was not in vain. Some senior journalists even boldly predict that the topic will become more popular than this year's presidential election. Mr. Stark, how can I prove that you are Iron Man? After the excitement, a female reporter who was closer to Tony asked with some suspicion. Mr. Stark, that's the latest weapon you developed. Didn't you announce that Stark Group will no longer produce weapons? Next to the female reporter, another black male reporter was more concerned about this issue. Mr. Stark, it is said that there is a boy fighting with you in the video. Can you tell us his identity? At the back, a reporter used his naturally loud voice to silence other reporters who wanted to ask questions. After Tony admitted his identity as Iron Man, people became more curious about the identity of the other boy in the photo. Well, there is indeed a boy fighting with me, but his identity cannot be announced for the time being. Facing various questions, Tony pinched his nose and answered the loud reporter's question. 10 minutes later, Wayne, Fatty, Pepper, and Tony, who had just finished dealing with reporters, walked out of the door of Stark Group and happened to see Agent Coulson standing at the door. You really didn't follow the script. Coulson smiled awkwardly. Before Wayne and the others came over, Coulson had already contacted Pepper in advance, and the note Pepper handed to Tony was provided by Coulson. But looking at the current situation, Coulson and his team have obviously done another useless job. Wayne, have you considered what I told you last time? Seeing that things on Tony's side were irreversible, Coulson turned his attention to Wayne. Well, I will be looking for clues about that organization in a while, so. We understand your situation, Professor. Before Wayne could refuse, Coulson blocked Wayne's excuse. S.H.I.E.L.D. has conducted a detailed investigation into Wayne's encounter, and the existence of that mysterious organization also has relevant records in S.H.I.E.L.D. However, due to limited information, it is only known that the organization's goal is to study mutants, and no other useful clues have been found. After S.H.I.E.L.D. told Professor X, who had a good cooperative relationship with them, about this matter, it aroused Professor. This can be regarded as the only time that bipolar mutants have reached an agreement on concepts in the past 10 years. They need to give some people some warnings. After all, this matter involves mutant children, and the protection of children belongs to each race, nature. What this organization has done has touched the bottom line of Professor X and Magneto, allowing the somewhat divided mutant group over the years to once again have a common goal. Then in a week, I might take him with me. Seeing this, Wayne didn't say anything more. He also had a crush on this long-famous mutant leader, but he needed to bring Fatty with him. After all, Fatty was also a member of the mutants. No problem. After receiving Wayne's affirmative reply, Coulson's face showed a standard smile again. Although there were some mistakes in Tony's matter this time, Wayne's problem was fortunately solved. Professor X has been pressing harder and harder recently. A week later, Wayne, Tony, Little Fatty, Wade, Pepper and others were all standing in an open space not far from the villa, as if waiting for something to arrive. Are you really not going? Wayne asked, looking at Wade next to him. After all, in Wayne's view, Wade should be considered a member of the mutants, so after returning from the Stark Group last time, Wayne asked Wade for his opinion, but Wade rejected it on the spot. Which one would you choose, to meet a bad old man or go on vacation with a beautiful woman? I saw Wade putting his arms around Vanessa next to him, and smiling at Wayne like a man knows how. A flower stuck in cow dung. Tony frowned next to him and glanced at Wade with some disgust. During this period, Wade was strictly guarding Tony and refused to give Tony a chance to come into contact with Vanessa. This made Tony, who had no idea at all, feel a little helpless. Now that he wanted to be a superhero, how could he have so much time to spend time and leisure? Drip drip. Suddenly, the watches on the hands of the little fat man and Tony sounded the alarm at the same time. After more than 10 seconds, the little fat man looked at the watch on his hand and said to the watch, "Anti-invisibility." As soon as he finished speaking, various hidden corners nearby simultaneously emitted light waves of a special frequency that swept into the surrounding sky. A fighter jet with a Black Eagle logo suddenly appeared in the sky that was empty just now. Ha ha ha, this little trick can't be hidden from us. Seeing everyone's surprised expressions, the little fat man suddenly felt proud. During this period, Tony and Fatty had put countless efforts into the artificial defense system. Fatty proposed to install this anti-invisibility device, and Tony did not refuse. According to Tony's words, since he decided to do something, he must do his best, so as long as he can think of something, no matter whether it will be used in the future, he must install it. Wait a minute, are you building a fortress? After the plane landed, Coulson walked off first. After greeting everyone, he asked half-jokingly. Originally, he planned to wait for the plane to land and suddenly appear, giving Wayne a surprise and also demonstrating S.H.I.E.L.D.'s technology and strength. But he didn't expect to be discovered by the other party just within 100 meters of the villa, and interfered with the aircraft's stealth device, making Coulson a little embarrassed who wanted to show off. However, Coulson didn't know that Tony and Fatty had already discovered their presence when they were 500 meters away from the villa. Okay, it's time for me to go. After a brief exchange of greetings, Wayne finally picked up his suitcase and walked to the plane with the little fat man. Hey, Wayne, come see me when you get back. Wayne, who was halfway there, heard Tony's call. He turned around and Tony smiled and made an okay gesture. How should I put it, I feel like sending my son to college. Watching Wayne get on the plane and slowly walk away, Tony, who had stood there in silence for a few minutes, suddenly said with emotion to Pepper next to him. This plane is awesome. Looking at the various professional equipment and supporting living facilities in the aircraft, Wayne said with some envy. At this time, Coulson was taking Wayne and the little fat man around in the plane, which was also one of his tasks. Build a good relationship with Wayne and increase Wayne's favorability towards S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, with the continuous development of the times, S.H.I.E.L.D. will face more challenges in the future. Therefore, a certain director of Luden has begun to consciously discover special talents and actively build relationships with capable talents so that he can have more backup when facing difficulties in the future. If you have the chance, I can take you to our headquarters to see where there are real big guys. Coulson, who was walking in front, still maintained a standard smile, and was 10,000 times more professional than the flight attendants at the airport. Wayne looked at Coulson in front of him with some surprise. Wayne also had a general understanding of the nature of S.H.I.E.L.D. He did not believe that the headquarters of such an organization could be visited casually. Then the meaning of Coulson's words is somewhat intriguing. Is S.H.I.E.L.D. preparing to win over me? Am I already that good? Wayne thought subconsciously. Coulson in front did not realize that his words gave Wayne a new understanding of his own excellence. After leading them to visit the aircraft, he went to deal with other things. They will arrive at their destination in about 4 hours. Coulson needs to greet each other in advance. In fact, according to Coulson privately revealed that the school is actually in New York, but in order to avoid others discovering the location of the school, so it takes more time to go around in the sky. Looking at the little fat man lying in the kitchen eating happily, he ran to the window alone, holding some information about mutants that Coulson gave him. I browsed through it briefly, and it all talked about the various oppressions that mutants suffered after awakening. In addition to hostility from strangers, some mutants were even ostracized by their relatives and friends. After reading for a while, Wayne put down the information in his hand. The content of this information was too depressing, which made Wayne a little upset. Looking at the dazzling sunshine outside the window, Wayne began to wander again. After escaping from the laboratory, Wayne found that he fell in love with the sun. The feeling of being bathed in the sun made him feel very intoxicated. Even the irritability just now seemed to be driven away by the sun. Feeling the warm sunshine on his body, Wayne stretched out and let out a comfortable groan. He lay back on the soft sofa and slowly fell into a deep sleep. The sun shone directly on Wayne's exposed skin, emitting a light that was imperceptible to the naked eye. Wayne, wake up! Wayne, who was sleeping, was suddenly awakened by a familiar voice. He opened his heavy eyelids with difficulty, and the fat man's big round face occupied all his sight. What's wrong? Silently distancing himself from the little fat man, Wayne lay lazily on the sofa and asked. After a good sleep, Wayne felt as if all the cells in his body were full of energy. The whole person's condition is better than when he first awakened his powers. But the wise Wayne felt that he should save this energy for use when it is useful. For now, just keep lying down. We'll be at the gifted school in 10 minutes. There was a hint of expectation in the little fat man's tone. Because of little fatty's abilities, he knows more about mutants than Wayne does, and he is also more aware of the embarrassing situation of mutants in society. Most ordinary people are very repulsive towards mutants, although Tony, Pepper and others they have come into contact with during this period do not belong to this category. But since the little fat man understood that he was a mutant, something had changed in his heart. He subconsciously divided himself and ordinary people into two races, and he was more willing to get close to his own kind. Well, isn't this a large forest? Wayne looked at the scenery below through the window with some curiosity. Everything he saw was green. Except for a straight road in the middle of this large green ocean, there was no sign of human habitation at all. This environment is much better than a steel city like New York. The little fat man saw that Wayne's expression was a little strange and quickly defended. Now the little fat man has a natural affection for this school he has never been to, and any problem he sees as an advantage. Looking helplessly at the fat man who seemed to have been brainwashed, Wayne closed his eyes again. Bang! 15 minutes passed in a blink of an eye, and the plane had successfully landed at the gate of the college. At this time, Wayne reluctantly got up from the sofa and lazily dragged his luggage out. Shaking his still sleepy head, Wayne also noticed that his current state was a bit strange, as if he had become very lazy since he was in the sun today. After getting off the plane, Wayne saw the college not far away. The entire college is located in a forest, and the unique buildings are surrounded by lush trees, giving people a relaxed and pleasant feeling. At this moment, the door of the college suddenly opened, and a figure walked out. Seeing the bald old man in the wheelchair slowly moving towards them, Coulson quickly greeted him. It was not his first time here. He had not been treated like this the previous 2 times. He was somewhat respectful to the ordinary old man in front of him, said. Long time no see, Professor. Haha, it's been a long time indeed. How is Nick lately? The professor in a wheelchair greeted Coulson politely. After all, Coulson represented S.H.I.E.L.D. at this time. Still the same. After Coulson answered politely, he watched the professor turn his eyes to Wayne, shrugged helplessly, and closed his mouth with some knowledge. Wayne was still dragging his suitcase lazily, glanced at the few people who suddenly walked out in front of him, and then focused on the bald old man. The two stared at each other for a long time, and no one around them broke the silence. Suddenly, Wayne frowned, looked at the bald old man in front of him and said, "What are you looking at?" Ahem. After coughing twice in embarrassment, Professor. Ha ha ha, nice to meet you, Wayne, and you, Stephen. Later, after a simple courtesy and handover with Coulson, Professor. He personally led Wayne and Stephen into Xavier's School for the Gifted, which specializes in accommodating mutants. After looking at the eye-catching name of the school at the gate, and then at Professor. Why is this school called a gifted school? Looking at Wayne who looked confused, Professor. Wayne, what do you think constitutes a genius? Well, and I. Ahem, smart guy. Wayne subconsciously said that he is as smart as me, but he still held back. After all, he was new to the ramp, so he still had to keep a low profile. After glancing at the embarrassed Wayne, Professor. I think genius refers to people who have talents. This kind of talent is something we can't decide, but no matter what kind of talent it is a precious gift given to us by God, just like our ability. Look at these children, including you, Wayne. In my eyes, you are all geniuses and the hope for the rise of mutants. Professor X's words made Wayne feel a little emotional after listening to them. In fact, Coulson had told Wayne before that most awakened mutants would begin to hate and fear their abilities due to their own mentality or the influence of external factors at the beginning of their awakening, and then begin to reject themselves. In addition to providing shelter to mutants, Professor. He is not as weak as the rumors outside, and will only seek perfection blindly. He just wants to use this method to fundamentally change the views of most ordinary people and mutants on this race. Generally speaking, people with far-reaching reputations are divided into two types. The first type is not as famous as meeting them, and the second type is not as famous as meeting them. When he first saw the famous professor, now, Wayne felt that this kind little old man really lived up to his reputation. After finishing speaking, Professor X continued to take Wayne and little Fatty around the campus. Normally Professor. But Professor X attached great importance to Wayne. From the first moment he saw Wayne, he discovered that this child was special. Carrying his luggage, Wayne slowly followed the wheelchair in front of him as he wandered around the campus, carefully experiencing the culture and life of this school. Mutant children can be seen playing and running around everywhere, ranging from little Doubting who is 5 or 6 years old to young people who are about the same height as Wayne, living very harmoniously in this school. There are even many mutants with obvious mutations in appearance who can wander around the campus calmly and discuss various interesting things with their friends. This kind of scene is impossible to appear in the outside world, especially for those mutants with mutated appearance. Once discovered by ordinary people, they will become the targets of local ordinary people. After walking around for half an hour, watching a little boy with horns playing football happily with his friends on the playground not far away, Professor, what do you think of this place? I fell in love with it. The little fat man was the first to say that in the past half hour, the little fat man had seen a real home for mutants. And you? Professor X smiled and looked at Wayne again. It's incredible. Looking at the weak old man in front of him, Wayne suddenly saw a majestic figure at this moment, single-handedly creating a utopia for many mutants. Professor. Next, Professor X personally took Wayne and the little fat man to their room. This is a very luxuriously decorated room. It is large in size and has 2 beds, but it does not seem crowded. It has all the furniture and electrical appliances. In terms of layout, it is not inferior to the room Wayne lived in at Tony's house. Lying on the bed, Wayne chatted wordlessly with the little fat man while thinking about what he had seen today. Unknowingly, fatigue swept through Wayne's nerves. Ever since he slept on the plane, Wayne felt that his body seemed to have undergone some changes. However, feeling the fuller power in his body, Wayne felt that this change should be in a good direction. Listening to the little fat man constantly explaining the various unfair treatments faced by mutants in the outside world and how desperate some mutants were after awakening, Wayne fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, Wayne saw a perfect world, a world where mutants and ordinary people lived in harmony. Early the next morning, a woman with beautiful red hair appeared in Wayne and the little fat man's room. After arranging classes for the little fat boy, the woman took the little fat boy to Professor X's office. Pushing open the thick door, besides Professor X sitting on the stool, there were several other people standing next to the desk. Seeing Wayne and the woman come in, Professor X smiled at Wayne and said hello. Good morning, Wayne. The person who brought you in is named Chin, and she is a teacher from the academy. Then he motioned to others to introduce themselves. A dark-skinned woman with white hair took the lead and said, hello, Wayne, my name is Aurora, you can call me Storm. A cool man wearing sunglasses next to him continued, Scott, Cyclops. Then, the most attractive man in the room, the man with blue skin and thick body hair, finally said, my name is Hank, hello, you can call me Beast. After listening to the self-introductions of several people, Wayne was silent for a moment and then said, my name is Wayne, you can call me. After thinking for a long time, Wayne still couldn't come up with a resounding name, and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Okay, Wayne, I came to you today because I want to talk to you. Professor X, who had been paying attention to Wayne, couldn't help laughing when he saw Wayne scratching his head. Ahem, what do you want to talk about? After coughing twice to cover up his embarrassment, Wayne instantly became serious, as if it was someone else who had just scratched his head. I did some research on your experience. Since you awakened your powers, you have experienced several things, which always seem to be accompanied by killing and death. Why do you think this is? Professor X pondered for a moment and then said, from the moment they awaken, the lives of many mutants will undergo earth-shaking changes and take another unusual path. This is certain. This is the stage where mutants are most likely to reject their mutant identity. This is because mutants at this stage have less control over their abilities. It is easy to cause accidents and hurt people around you or other innocent people. Since Wayne's awakening, He has experienced several battles in succession, all of which were accompanied by death. Professor X is somewhat worried that Wayne will have a bad view of the identity of mutants. Hearing Professor it is accompanied by death. But Wayne didn't find that his mentality was affected. On the contrary, he liked his ability very much. After carefully thinking about a book he had read called The Complete Collection of Valorantas, Wayne raised his head, looked into Professor X's eyes and said solemnly, "Death is like the wind, always with me." Wayne's answer made the atmosphere very awkward. Chin and Storm subconsciously looked at Professor X with strange eyes. This is what you call a special child. This brain circuit is indeed very special. It seems that these experiences have not had any impact on you. Professor. The only problem he was worried about was solved, and a kind smile appeared on Professor X's face again. Do you have anything to ask me? How much do you know about organizations? Wayne asked the question that concerned him most at the moment. Frankly, not much. Professor X frowned. Professor. Due to our special nature, many ambitious organizations or countries will adopt some illegal methods against our compatriots. In recent years, we have cracked down on several such organizations, but more new organizations are emerging. Appearance. Isn't there a way to solve it? Seeing that the old man in front of him, who was one of the bipolar mutants, could not change this phenomenon, Wayne asked unwillingly. There is nothing we can do for the time being. After all, the special nature of our identity makes us subject to more constraints than others. The mutant community is still very fragile. Excessive behavior will cause more and greater backlash in society. Professor. The angry expressions of the 4 teachers standing nearby also betrayed their thoughts. It's not that they don't want to take action, but as one of the bipolar mutants, there are too many agencies watching their every move. Any of their actions reflects the attitude of the entire race of mutants, which prevents them from acting as they wish. They need to be responsible for the entire race. I will change everything. I will make all these organizations disappear. I will let all mutants in the world walk on the streets with their heads held high. After a long silence, Wayne suddenly said, looking at the silent people in front of him and thinking about everything he saw on campus yesterday, Wayne suddenly felt as if there was an extra mission on his shoulders. A mission that is so big that it makes me feel heavy, but yet I am willing to do it. I believe you. Looking at Wayne in front of him, Professor. Build a dream world that you and your friends have not accomplished for many years. Looking at Wayne being led out by Chin, Professor X's eyes flashed with memories. In the past few decades, in order to protect the safety of some mutants and to help mutants obtain more benefits, he has been working around major countries and organizations. He even made his best friend think that he was too weak and that he could not bear the burden of the revival of mutants. But looking at Wayne slowly leaving, Professor. Ha ha ha, as people get older, the world will be dominated by young people from now on. Thinking about what Wayne just said, Professor X took a sip of tea and burst out laughing. Do you believe what he said? I think it's better to peek into his brain. Scott, who said nothing, suddenly said. For some reason, when he saw Wayne for the first time, he didn't like this lazy young man, people. After giving Scott a deep look, Professor. When he first spied on Wayne through a brainwave amplifier, he discovered that Wayne was special. Once his mental power came into contact with Wayne, it would melt at the touch of ice like ice touching a flame. Although he didn't understand the reason, Professor. Looking at the red hair floating freely in front of him, Wayne asked curiously, are we going to class now? Yes, you need to go to class every day. Jean replied. Quote. Hearing Chin's answer, Wayne suddenly had the urge to leave here. Growing up, Wayne's least favorite thing was going to class. Instead of wasting time in class, it is better to lie in bed and continue to immerse yourself in the sea of books. During this period of time, Wayne found that the effect of his reading was very obvious. For example, if he had not read the book when asked by Professor, he was stunned for a while. Yes, you can read in class. Although it is not as comfortable as a bed, it is not unacceptable. With this thought, Wayne temporarily gave up on escaping secretly and followed Chin to the classroom. After a while, Wayne walked to the door of the classroom. After Chin communicated with the teacher, Wayne was pulled to the podium by the teacher who was in class. My name is Lena, please introduce yourself, Wayne. The teacher is a middle-aged woman in her 30s, wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses. She is dressed very intellectually, and she looks much more pleasing to the eye than the doughboy in the orphanage. Wayne looked down the podium and saw children of similar age below him. The little fat boy was sitting in the 4th row, waving to him. Seeing Wayne staring down without speaking, the teacher thought that Wayne was an introverted child and encouraged him. Don't be shy, Wayne, introduce yourself to everyone, otherwise everyone will remember you as a shy little boy in the future. Seeing the pairs of eyes below staring at him and the teacher's words of encouragement, Wayne calmed down and sang. How would you like to remember me, with a smile or with silence? Quote. After holding on to the glasses that almost fell off, the teacher gave up on the idea of letting Wayne introduce himself. He signaled to Wayne that he could go down and choose his seat and said to the students in the class, "Ha ha ha, it seems that the new classmate likes singing very much. From now on, classmate Wayne will be our music class representative." Quote. After ignoring the secret glances from several girls, Wayne, who was sitting in the last row, suddenly stiffened when he heard the teacher's words. I lost this operation. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.